Sword of Coming Chapter 932. Qin Pingan didn't cross the threshold and stepped into Jianxi Hall. After all, it was where the Patriarch Hall of Xiang Mansion was located. He turned around and said with a smile, "Let's go to the kitchen for a long time." The hanging portrait of the Patriarch inside, the middle one is Wu Yi, who wears a robe and steps on a cloud shoe. In addition, the portraits of the palace masters of the past dynasties are arranged side by side. And tomorrow on the side of Xindu Mountain, there will be a portrait of Qin Pingan in the center of Qingping Jinzong Patriarch Hall. When Qing Tong moved, he turned his head and glanced at the plaque, Jian Qi Tang. The generals or knights in the books often say, "Reach out and press the sword and scream." It's just that Xiang Mansion is a sect that doesn't even have sword repair, so he is embarrassed to use such a hall name. This is very ethical and uncoordinated. However, it can be seen that Wu Yi of the Taoist name Dongling seems to have inherited part of the water transport left by the 10,000-year-old Jiao, and the rest, Qing Shanchang of the Dafu Academy, should have been given to the Hanxijiang water god. The New Year's Eve dinner at Xiang Mansion was held in Zimengtang, which had always been used to entertain guests. After all, there are not a few larger mountain mansions that will eat New Year's Eve dinner properly. The genealogical monk is not going to travel or retreat, or participate in various ceremonies. Near Zimengtang there is a long line of kitchens that separate houses such as delicacies of mountains and seas, wines and fruits, serving as the maid of the chef's house, coming and going like a fish. A rich family with a deep heritage always talks about the food that is not tired of eating, and if you pay more attention to it, you will work the matter of clear offerings in the mountains and wilds. There is Zhu Lian as a housekeeper in Luapa Mountain, who is not afraid of trouble. Inside and out, big and small things are all taken care of anyway, so there is really no need for others to worry about it. Every year, not every month, Zhu Lian would receive the salary of a snowflake money on time, saying that he was trying to make up a small summer money. Standing outside a stove, Qin Pingan glanced at a few food boxes and Zendala, jokingly, "According to my old chef, some of the so-called old-fashioned restaurants are just the same as the first time cooking." At the Shijianhuchi Shuiqing, Qin Pingan had tasted the bamboo stick crab. It was the first time in his life that he was a host and hosted a banquet. There are only a handful of such things. The most recent time was on the Changpu River in Dali capital. Guan Yiran and Jing Quan were invited to have a drink. Of course it was not a flower wine. Now Jing Quan has left Beijing as the prefect of Baoshi County in the new prefecture. Qing Tong asked, "Old cook? Is that the noble son Zhu Lian from a blessed lotus root?" Qin Pingan asked, "Have you seen Zhu Lian's true face?" Qing Tong nodded and said, "I am no stranger to a wafudi. I often go there to relax. Of course I have seen Zhu Lian. And I didn't dare to watch more. Because the Jinyao Tower and Guandao Temple are neighbors, Qing Tong had seen Zhu Lian twice in a distance. It was really a wonderful person. Of course this guy was still pretty good looking. Once when Zhu Lian was young he went to the outskirts of the capital to go out in spring, and once when Zhu Lian was young he walked alone with swords. In Jiguai legend and jianghu romance, there are often vulgar bridges where the woman fell in love with a strange man at first sight. Don't believe it? Zhu Lian is on the river and lake without talking, just relying on a face. You don't know how much love debts you have incurred. The romantic noble son, climbing high and looking into the distance, standing against the railing, just twisting a strand of hair on the temple with 2 fingers, as if he was about to twist the hearts of the women who were watching. It seems that as long as you are infatuated with one person, whether you are married or not, you can't ask for it, or you can grow old together, affectionate like a vengeance, and you will never stop if you don't die. How many old white-haired women on the rivers and lakes, when they are very old, still want to see Zhu Lang in this life, and they are ashamed to see Zhu Lang? Qing Tong ridiculed, "When will you hold Jinghua Shuiyue at Luopashan? If Zhu Lian is willing to restore his true appearance, I will definitely support him and promise to start with a grain of money every time." The 4 people in the picture scrolls brought out of the Uwafudi by Qin Pingan, and the 3 of Wei Xian, none of them were hidden and tucked away. They showed themselves in true form, but Zhu Lian had changed his face, and became an old man with a rickety figure and a mouthful of meat. At that time, Qin Pingan was kept in the dark anyway, but Qing Tong found it very interesting. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Really? I can discuss with Zhu Lian, and open a piece of Jinghua Shuiyu for fellow Taoists alone. After that, I'll only have 1 Gaiyuqian. I promise that you can see Zhu Lian every day. See you until you are full." Qing Tong was silent. Qing Tong is also considered a well-informed Taoist man, but a handsome man with the appearance of Zhu Lian. It seems that he hasn't seen the second one. It is the woman who is praised as the beauty of the country. I am afraid that she will be ashamed. Beauty, beauty, it turns out that it's not just being monopolized by women. The beauty of youth, the wind is clear and the moon is white, and the thinking is innocent. Young, handsome, undifferentiated, banished immortals. But don't think that Zhu Lian is an embroidered pillow with an empty skin. Later, Eugenie and his ilk, the so-called summit, became the #1 in the world just because the lotus roots are so big. And from the tycoon and noble son to the mainstay of the fallen country, and then to the Zhu Lian who dominates the martial arts lunatic, he became the well-deserved #1 in the world, just because the lotus roots are so big. It seems that the results are the same, but the two sides are in completely different situations. Chen Pingan asked coldly, is the old view of the master's method of harmony, similar to the avenue of when there is nothing wrong in the world in Yanfeng? Qing Tong asked, the hidden official said that the harvest will be the next day? Chen Pingan smiled and said, just guess it casually. It's really just casual guessing because just now Qing Tong talked about Xiaomo's wine making at Luobao Beach, and Xiaomo's identity will have the term fate from heaven in later generations. Coupled with the true body of the old view master, and this smelly bull nose and old way, some of the actions in that battle seemed to be slightly erratic, but there was no too obvious bias, and on the whole it was still standing. In the Haoran world, the old Guanzhou didn't choose to lean towards the wild world because of his origin in the Great Tao. As for the sake of wine in the world, it has always been a matter of peace. A chaotic person is not as good as a peaceful dog. Who has spare time to make wine? What's more, all dynasties and generations often have different levels of prohibition. As for the so-called nights in the wine shop and restaurants, it is not realistic to say a few caddies of beef at every turn. A series of clues that seemed to be far away from the sky, after intermittently put together, made Qin Pingan feel slightly in his heart, and began to quickly go through the books in the library in the Lake of Mind, and finally found an ancient and unfamiliar old saying. There is a potential thread that is not easy to detect. Qin Pingan slowly said, times and years are abundant and there are many grains and stalemates and there are also high grains, trillions and z. It is wine for wine and blessings are for all people so as to make 100 gifts. Qing Tong's expression was calm and he didn't say a word. Zhoumo felt that this action was inappropriate. It was a bit like acquiescence and he immediately added a sentence. The Hermit Lord is really a fantastic idea. Qin Pingan glanced obliquely. No matter what the final truth, presumably Qing Tong's general guessing direction could not escape this context. Does this mean that in the peaceful and prosperous age, the old masters of the Taoist temple in the East China Sea will have high combat power? But if it's in troubled times, the morality will decline, and the attacking force will be weakened? Qing Tong felt very annoying. The old Taoist temples in the East China Sea, the Sunbao Valley in the corridors of the Taoist temples, and Huang Kankan on the Saga field were all done by the master of the old masters. The little Taoist boy who had his eyes above the top and carried a big gourd slanting all the year round was not qualified to be involved. And these, and the sword-raising gourd, one of the gourd vines planted by Taoist ancestors in the past, is called Douyang. When the average monk hears this name, he will immediately think of the phrase, the sea is not worth fighting for. So mystery, to be precise, is it both mystery and mystery or return to the basics? It's really just a measure of things. And the world needs to use the most amount of things, isn't it just the grains that are harvested every year? Qin Pingan walked towards Zemengtang rippling waves as if out of the mirror, showing his figure, and then said with Qing Tong, don't hide your figure. In the entire Xiang mansion, only Wu Yi of the Yuaning realm was able to perceive that aura. She left Huang Chu and rushed to the place with murderous aura, only to be stunned on the spot. I never thought that this person would take the initiative to come to the door. After Qin Pingan's proposal, Wu Yi didn't have to think about it at all, and he agreed on the spot without hesitation. Not to mention that you can earn that precious and unusual merit in vain. Even without this great gift, Wu Yi would nod his head to help light a scent of water. Because the road her father pointed out for her could not go around Qin Pingan, it was closely related to Yu Lu, the deceased prince of the Lu dynasty. Yu Lu and Qin Pingan had been friends for many years and still had half a classmate friendship. As for why his father was able to make sure that Yu Lu, a loose and idle survivor of the country, would settle down in Tongyi's house to restore the country to Lu's family, Wu Yi was not interested. Wu Yi asked Qin Pingan to wait for a while, and she quickly walked to the Jianxi hall, opened a secret restraint, and took out a mountain treasure from the secret room. As for the female cultivator wearing melee, since Qin Pingan didn't introduce her identity, Wu Yi didn't ask much. Back in the corridor of the carved beams and painted buildings, Wu Yi handed out small wooden boxes to Qin Pingan. On the wooden box are carved the statues of the priest Jiaolong, the female fairy Luanfeng, and the ancient Real man riding the tortoise Lin. This thing is the treasure of the townhouse of Xiang Mansion, and the palace owners of the past dynasties don't even want to see it. Wu Yi originally planned to give it to a certain sword fairy embryo in the future to be accepted as a direct disciple by himself, and then wait for the other party to form a pill, and then use it as a late apprenticeship and congratulatory gift. Qin Pingan laughed dumbfounded. "I'm not here to fight the autumn wind, what are you doing?" What's inside is an extremely rare ancient sword pill. Wu Yi mistakenly thought that the other party didn't like this meeting gift, so he had to sullen his heart and patiently explained, "It was the gift that my father gave me when I was in the Dongfu realm." Of course, the most important thing is that his father was full and in a good mood at the time, and he would reward this precious treasure. Qing Tong just glanced at the wooden box casually, and listened to Wu Yi's words, "extremely rare." After Miao Lei, Qing Tong twitched the corner of his mouth. His realm was not high and his tone was not small. But when Wu Yi read the Tao Ju silently, his erased the layers of restraint on the pocket sword case, and for a while the sword overflowed and the purple energy rose. Qing Tong was slightly surprised. It was really a valuable thing. In a long string of purple and gold texts circulating in precious light, there is a sentence. No one knows about facing the wall for thousands of years, only the mud body is needed for the Sanqing. Following the several secret prohibitions set by Cheng Longzhou, after Wu Yi opened it, the text suddenly melted like snow and dispersed in an instant. Even Wu Yi was caught off guard and had no time to gather it. Obviously, Wu Yi mostly got his father's reminder to open all restrictions on the first time. Qin Pingan rolled up his sleeves and put all the words in his sleeves. Wu Yi regretted it a little and said in a low tone, "I heard my father said that this sword pill is from Xi'er in the Middle Earth of the ancient times. It was made by a real Didao person. It was originally given to a Xi'er deputy. The treasure of the mountain." In a general sense, the so-called ancient times of the monks today are compared with the ancient years, 10,000 years ago, starting with 4 points in the world. For example, xianxia is to build a Confucian temple, and then use the battle of slashing the dragon. There is no more real dragon in the world as the end point. This is the ancient era in a broad sense. Of course, there are also 3 or 4,000 years forward. The use of an undocumented change as a hidden node is a more narrow term. Qin Pingan still didn't take the sword box, but just said softly, "I heard that the ancient Xia person, the main metal casting and smelting and the genus of feathers and birds. During those years, according to the ritual system established by the ritual saints, the emperor offered sacrifices to the world's famous mountains and rivers. The 5 sacred mountains were regarded as the Sangong, and Dadu was regarded as the princes. However, the true master of the 5 mountains is not a mountain monarch. At that time, the mountain monarch Diyue was more like an assistant official. The assistant was a real person, and the 5 mountains were the real people's government. Position, high position. For example, the 2 or 3 real people who ruled in Nanyue, 1 master and 2 mates, are in charge of the division of the world's astrology, and also the ichthyosaurs of the aquatic clan. Ansia's most noticeable responsibilities were, of course, casting, which to some extent resembled the Ministry of Industry of later imperial courts. The so-called real man governance is the real land gods, which are permanent places in the world. Of course, the land immortals at that time were not as flooded as later generations. They were not as popular as the monks in the 2 realms of the Golden Core and Yuaning. They were more like ancient times. Xiaomo and Qing were with him. The so-called earth immortals in our eyes. Wu Yi gritted his teeth, pushed the sword case forward and said in a deep voice, "It's not for free. If someone recovers from Tongyi's Hao in the future, I plan to assist him. At that time I may need Qin Shan's homii. Say a few words." Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Is it the trick that Qing Shanchang taught you?" Wu Yi nodded. Qin Pingan took the sword box, lowered his head, raised a sleeve and gently put it in it. After he raised his head, he smiled and said, "If it's just this, then you might lose money." Wu Yi smiled and put it down. My father didn't let her give gifts as soon as they met. Wu Yi really underestimated the weight of this sword box. Moreover, she took refuge in Lu. For the latter, it was not a kind of gift in the snow. So speaking of it, Wu Yi still wants to have a friendship and incense with Luopishan, especially the hidden official. Because in the study of the Dafu Academy, my father said a meaningful word to remind Wu Yi not to feel that he had reached Tongyi's Hao, so he didn't have to deal with the master Qin Shan. The mountains are high and the rivers are long. We'll meet often. Qin Pingan said, "It should be a congratulatory gift given to us in advance for the establishment of the next sect in Luopa Mountain." After the battle of slashing the dragon, the daffodils of the descendants of the dragon's genus, if they can walk the river to transform the dragon, are considered to be Taoist, and only these dragons can change their appearances, with various identities, rank among the temples and the landscape of a country. Complementary luck is a mutually beneficial long-term business. It is not just a benefit for one party. It is tantamount to stealing the dragon energy of a country's monarch and secretly eating away the national zhua. In the history of the vast 9 continents, there are occasional the Chuan Guoyu seal seems to have cracks for no reason, which is the precursor of Guzuo's breaking. The reason is occasionally, of course, because there are 72 academies staring at the mountains and rivers of Jiuzhou. Once discovered, a genus of flood dragons dared to do this, a gentleman and a wise man can cut it to death. On the other hand, Wu Yi's father, Qing Longzhou, served as Huang Tingguo's ceremonial assistant in his early years. For this 10,000-year-old Jiao, it may be just a game of relaxation in the world, but for Huang Tingguo's luck in a country and landscape, it is very big. Helpful. The only trouble and sequelae of the Taoist Jiao who enters the dynasty as an official is that after a country is destroyed, he will be affected, and then it will be like facing a catastrophe. This in turn led to even a primordial elder Jiao like Qing Longzhou still afraid to leave the dojo and easily enter the world to assist the king of the world. Because according to the historical evolution of the Haoran world, for each big dynasty and small country, it is often a catastrophe in 300 years. Only some descendants of flood dragons who are stagnant in the Longmen realm and are destined to be unable to break the bottleneck for a long time will choose a newly established imperial court as the opportunity for breaking the border. Regardless of the calamity 200 or 300 years later, based on this pill formation, talk about other things, and become a golden core monk, and it will not be too late to carry that calamity again. Wu Yi was shocked by the saying that he was under the sect. Luopishan was promoted to the sect. Wu Yi was not too surprised. But if you want to say that he created the next sect without stopping, how many of them have been seen for thousands of years? Even less than the 14th realm monks in the legend, right? The next sect is in Tongyi's Hao. Qin Pingan continued, it seems that you have become neighbors with Wu Daoyu. At this point, Qin Pingan glanced again with blue eyes. Fellow Taoist, you feel your conscience and talk about it, coincidence? Qing Tong has already accepted his fate. Qin Pingan and Wu Yi walked side by side, but it was more like Qin Pingan leading the way to a certain place saying, I don't know for the time being whether Yu Lu will return to the country. There is a choice, Wu Daoyu may wish to consider it? Wu Yi smiled and said, listen to it. Qin Pingan said in his heart that a woman from the Dugu clan would soon establish a country and proclaim the emperor on the banks of the Tongye Zhoxie River. Wu Yi was very heart-stirring. Rather than resuming his country in Tongyi's Hao, would he ask for peace? Or is it that I actually have hope? 2 countries and 1 country division? Wu Yi said, let me think about it. Qin Pingan smiled and said, such a big matter must be carefully considered. Qing Tong said with his heartfelt voice, this Wu Yi is still clumsy. This sword pill is truly precious, and it is a masterless thing that is easy to refine and succeed. No matter what it is, it can be used. In short, compared to Jian Xiufei Zi who bred his own life flying sword, it is difficult and easy to use and it is different. If it is given to a Qi trainer who is not originally a sword repairer, the difficulty is still not small, but if it is given to a sword fairy embryo who is already a sword repairer, it will be even more powerful. Qin Pingan nodded and said, I have a deep understanding of this. Originally, Qing Tong wanted to say, a gentleman doesn't take advantage of others, are you so ignorant of this sword pill? Deliberately responding to the young hermit, just waited up, and felt that he still didn't want to provoke this person, so instead he changed his mouth and said, I don't know each other, I don't know myself in Baoshan. After all, I still haven't gotten the fate, so I will draw water from a bamboo basket. Qin Pingan said, the same is true. For example, Zozi. In fact, there is also a young swordsman who seems to have become old enemies before both sides have veiled their faces. While Qin Pingan was attending the Confucian temple discussions, there was a young man on Yuanyangzu who made money by copying scriptures as his main business. He often went fishing there in his spare time. This person is the sword repair Lu Kai that Qin Pingan has always wanted to find, and he is one of the 10 young people in the world. Lu Kai owns 2 sword-raising gourds, named Mind and Immediately. The former raises the sharpest flying sword while the latter raises the fastest flying sword. Like Qin Pingan, Lu Kai possesses 2 natal flying swords. Among them, the flying sword by Luo is known as one sword breaking 10,000 swords. The second natal flying sword, White Ju, can even ignore the constraints of time. Lu Kai used the mind of raising the sword gourd to warm the flying sword by Luo, and the immediate warm raising of the flying sword White Jew, it is simply a match made in heaven. Since it is tailor-made for Lu Kai, isn't it a tailor-made for Qin Pingan? Because it is clearly aimed at restraining and overwhelming Qin Pingan's two natal flying swords when he first became a sword repairer, the caged bird in Jingdiua. Qin Pingan asked, "Does this sword pill have a name?" Wu Yi nodded and said, "I heard my father said that it was called Naiwan." Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's a big name." Wu Yi said in a huff, "Lord Qin Shan, don't sprinkle salt on my wound." The host and guest walked around, approaching a secluded courtyard. Qin Pingan did not knock on the door but just stopped as if waiting for something. Instead of investigating the words and deeds in the house, it helped isolate the two parties who were drinking tea in the room, so that Qing Tong couldn't explore the movement in the courtyard. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "The hospitality of Xiang Mansion is as good as ever." Wu Yi just pretended not to hear the thorns in the words of the young hermit. She leaned against the pillars, wrapped her hands around her chest and sneered. "I don't feel at ease anymore. How can I be as leisurely as I am now, boil famous springs and taste good tea?" Qing Tong is amazed. The little Yuaning Shuijiao, his tone is not worse than that of a real dragon. It's just weird. Qing Tong found that Qin Pingan didn't seem to be annoyed at all. Instead, he smiled and nodded in agreement. "That's right." Qing Tong is inevitably curious. What is sacred, can make Qin Pingan treat such an exception? Is that the famous Baihu River goddess of water? Or the six-boundary Takashi from the Bad Street? Mostly the latter. It seems that the hermit sir next to him always has some weird particularities. If you guess the other way around, you can always guess the answer. Inside the small courtyard house, the tea is fragrant and pleasant. Xuanhuan recalls the past, feeling very emotional. The life experience is a coincidence and coincidence. Regarding the beneficiary, who had been killed halfway, Xuanhuan was at a loss after leaving Xiang Mansion last time. At that time, the goddess of water really couldn't understand how a young martial artist who was so respectful on Sun Dengxian's side could make the founder of Xiang Mansion look so high, and finally changed her mind, pinching her nose and letting her go. Therefore Xuanhuan tentatively asked Qin Pingan's roots and feet on Sun Dengxian's side. Hometown? But a certain son of a tycoon who likes to travel in the mountains and waters of the Dali court, is he a Chinese who is only slightly inferior to the surname of Xiangju state? In fact, when Xuanhuan was questioning, she had a bit of complaint in her heart. "Why did you Sun Deng first have this kind of incense on the mountain? You didn't explain it sooner." Sun Deng was also very helpless at the time. He really didn't know it all and he didn't intend to hide anything from Madame Xiao. At the mansion that night, Sun Deng accompanied Xuanhuan to the Shuameng Hall for a banquet. He happened to meet the other party in his party. If it hadn't been for Qin Ping's initiative to break the cause, he would not have recognized it at all. After all, the first time the two sides met was on the mountain road in front of the ruined temple in Centipede Ridge. But at that time the other party was just a young man, with a boy in Xingyi and a girl in a pink skirt around him. They were weird and smart. Sun Deng was an old river and lake. Seeing the origins of the two little guys, it was just a simple reminder of the young boy. Sun Deng thought about things that he said and forgot, and he could keep the other person thinking about it for so many years. If it weren't for the two book boy maidservants, who were too garish, it made Sun Dengxian a little vague. Otherwise Sun Dengxian could not remember just the boy's face. So that the two sides met again and they could actually help Baihu River to turn the bad. At that banquet with hidden murderous intent, Qin Pingan helped to stop the wine and let Xiang Mansion disregard the predecessors. After that, the relationship between Baihujiang and Xiang Mansion was barely eased. In the past few years there has been less innuendo in Tinghe River God. Sun Deng drank a cup of tea first, and suddenly found that the goddess of water sitting on the opposite side seemed to have weird eyes, so she stared at himself. Sun Dengxian wondered, "Mrs. Xiao?" Xuanhuan held back his laugh, made a gesture of raising his hand and patted heavily. Sun Dengxian became more and more at a loss. Is this playing a riddle with himself? Xuanhuan pursed her lips and laughed and stopped selling the jerk. She said, "If I remember correctly, after you did such a move back then, you just said to him like this, 'Good boy, he's a big name. You can come to Ziki Mansion to eat and drink.'" Sun Deng was embarrassed when he heard the words, and after holding back for a long time, he could only suffocate the phrase, "The one who doesn't know is not guilty," with insufficient confidence. After the reunion, one party kept calling Sun Daxia. "Don't say anything about it." Sun Dengxian just thought he was a few years older, so he didn't take it seriously at that time. In the past years, Lizhu Cave, Huaihuan County, Longquan County, the young mountain owner of Luapa Mountain, and Lu Xianying, the sword immortal of Longquan Jianzong, jointly asked Jianjingyang Mountain. After that was the Shanshui Dibao from the Middle-earth divine continent. First, he became the last hermit of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and then defended half of the city alone. Finally, as a hermit, he led the 4 mountain sword immortals into the wilds. In the hinterland, asked Jian Tua Yushan together. A big shock, a big shock. Sun Deng was close to Jiazi in his early years, but he was still strong with only 2 temples and stars, but his face was still less than half 100 years old. This is due to his early career in the army. Huang Tinghua has always been peaceful and fine. Sun Dengxian had no complaints about this. It was only because Huang Tinghua later surrendered without a fight, betrayed his covenant with the De Sui Gao clan, and switched to the De Li Song clan. Sun Dengxian resigned from his official position and only did those who cast demons and exterminate demons. As a result, because the evil fox charm he had captured by his own hands, he turned around and changed his face, and became the pillow of the emperor, and he was completely frustrated with Sun Dengxian. It just happened that Xuanhuan was attentive. To solicit, he took refuge in the Baihu River Water Mansion and became half a rich idler. Thinking back to that year. My surname is Qin and my name is Pingon, so Daxia Sun called me Qin Pingon directly. Okay, I will call you Qin Pingon. Reminisce about the past. Drinking tea is like drinking alcohol. If you are drinking, you still have to drink your tears. Xuanhuan said softly, Sun Gongfeng, I can see that Lord Qinshan really admires you a bit. That person back then wasn't just talking to anyone casually and kindly. Xuanhuan admits that he still has this vision. Real people do not show their faces, such as high-ranking officials riding bad horses, rich and noble but not obvious. Sun Deng first smiled and said, that was the case back then, but I don't know if we meet now, can we talk a few words? Xuanhuan hesitated for a moment, her eyes murmured, then I let you go to Luapa Mountain as a guest, why don't you keep going? The Shui Mansion will not ask you to do anything, it's just like the visitor during the holidays. Have a drink with the young hermit and talk about some interesting anecdotes. The hint clearly stated that Xuanhuan had tried it all, but the chief consecrator of his own water mansion did not nod his head, and never said why. He was very stern. Sun Deng smiled first but still didn't explain anything. After all, the goddess of water is not a quack and it is difficult to talk with the real quack. Going up for a drink, it's a human being. That kind of wine, even if it is xianxia fermented wine, is not intoxicating, it tastes not as good as a pot of inferior market wine when the water meets the water. There are already so many smart people in the world, so there is no shortage of me, Sun Deng. Xuanhuan just rushed to mention it casually. Naturally, he wouldn't really want Sun Deng to get close to the young hermit for himself or the Baihu River Water Mansion. It's just that on Xuanhuan's side, there is also a secret that is difficult to tell. Whenever he thinks of it, he can't wait to dig a hole. This matter can be regarded as a handle in Wu Yi's hands. Sun Deng said goodbye to the goddess of water, left the house, preparing to walk in the courtyard and stretch his muscles and bones. He actually lives in the wing room on the side of the yard. Are men and women who are lonely and widowed? If you didn't arrange the two of you in the same room, even if Xiang Mansion treats guests well. There was a knock on the door just outside the courtyard. When he walked to open the door, Sun Deng was stunned for a while, except for Wu Yi who came to the door himself. Next to Wu Yi, there was a young man standing beside him in a blue shirt and long gown, with a refined manner and full of moral spirit. Xuanhuan had also walked out of the house quickly with a pair of long autumn eyes, a flash of shame flashed, but he quickly returned to normal. The man bowed his hands and smiled brightly, Daxia Sun Mrs. Xiao meet again. Sun Dengxian was only an offering to Jiangshan's mansion, but Xuanhuan was the righteous of Jiangshui, but the person in front of him, intentionally or unintentionally put Sun Deng first in front of him and Xuanhuan behind. Xuanhuan didn't dare to care about such trivial matters. He quickly grabbed his knees and bowed his knees. He lowered his eyebrows and said softly, by Hujiang Xuanhuan, I have seen Mr. Chen. Sun Dengxian clasped his fists and laughed loudly, Sun has seen Lord Qinshan. Wu Yi curled his lips. The Xuanhuan is really lucky. It seems that he can always meet this guy next to him. Is this auntie who came too early as a coincidence? Why, could it be that a wooden sign for God's position was quietly erected in the Baihu River Waterhouse? It's just that Wu Yi had to admit that Xuanhuan was really a beauty who has a stunner in front of her husband, enough to move people, thrilling and intent to keep her eyes on. When the woman saw it, she felt sorry for me. It's no wonder that in Huang Tinghua, there will be so many strange novels that scribble her fame and praise her. There is a goddess on the river who wears a purple lotus scarf. With lotus root shoes under one step, Lingbo does not produce dust. I don't know if this kind of poem was written by Xuanhuan, and then I was asked to find someone to write it with a knife. Wu Yi looked at Xuanhuan and asked bluntly, Mrs. Xiao, let's talk, what can I do for you? Qin Pingan smiled and said, you talk about your business and I drink our wine with Daxia Sunday. Sun Deng was embarrassed at first. He didn't bring wine with him, nor did he prepare any drinks in the courtyard. However, Qin Pingan had already helped out. I have 2 pots of homemade Zhedangshan drinks. When he arrived at Sun Dengxian's house, he poured 2 large bowls of drinks. Sun Dengxian didn't know what to say, so Qin Pingan asked Sun Daxia if he had traveled to Suian County. With such a conversation, the 2 parties started talking, and soon there were 2 bowls of drinks. Qin Pingan simply took off his cloth shoes and sat cross-legged in a chair. Sun Dengxian also drew on the gourd. He was no longer tense. Old Jianghu, as long as he is not so restrained, he can actually speak quite well. The young hermit was looking for a chat. Sun Deng took the initiative to chat about an interesting story. He asked Qin Shanju if he remembered the rest of Centipede Ridge. Qin Pingan smiled and said of course. Sun Deng wiped his mouth first and said with a smile. These old guys, as long as they get together, they will always talk about Qin Shanju. As for themselves, they are not embarrassed to say that they recognize you. If they occasionally interrupt a few words, they will be told by a young hermit. Or maybe you were there at the time. Sun Deng was prone to drinking and hurt his face first, and his face was flushed. In fact, he was only slightly drunk and asked, can you ask me something? Qin Pingan smiled and said, Daxia Sun wanted to ask Chao's boxing method? Sun Deng asked first, isn't the pot not opened and which pot is not lifted? What's the matter? Isn't it just asking Chao Ci losing 4 games in a row? Qin Pingan raised the wine bowl and gently touched it, each drank a big sip, raised the back of his hand and wiped his mouth. Chao's boxing method is like a natural success. However, Qin Pingan quickly added, of course it's temporary. The Gongdalan one is much better than the 3 I had no fight back on the Great Wall of Jianghu. Sun Dengxian wondered, how did Qin Shanju learn boxing? Qin Pingan thought about it seriously and said, I was able to endure hardships when a master taught boxing and feeding in the early years. In addition, I have not slackened for so many years. Practicing boxing is the foundation of one's body, and both are indispensable. Sun Deng smiled and asked, why do you think you made wine by yourself? Qin Pingan joked, why make money? I am afraid of being poor. If you don't have a lot of money, you have to panic. The money of the poor is sweat on the palms of the hands. If you are tired, there will be nothing, and if you are tired, there will be nothing. Taking a sip of his drink, Qin Pingan continued, of course there is no shortage of money now, but making money is almost the same as drinking, and it is easily addictive. If you can't keep your own money, you have to be at ease when you have some money. Because I heard from the old people in my hometown that saving money for children and grandchildren is not necessarily a blessing. You can't catch it or you can't catch it, you can only do good. Jita, the blessing left to the children and grandchildren, they can't do it unless they want to catch it. The most important thing is the old saying that every household has a field called Futian, and the roots of wisdom are easy to grow in Futian. Therefore, it is better than anything else to give a piece of Futian to the children and grandchildren. Better than money, even better than books. Sun Deng nodded first. It's a pity that many people don't think that way anymore. They think that as long as they are not cruel, they can't make a lot of money. Qin Pingan hesitated. I just have to admit that many times, it seems that this is really the case. For those who are fierce, life is better. Sun Deng sighed first. Qin Pingan smiled and said, it's okay. It's not a big deal. We will walk through the Yangguan Road and the single-plank bridge. We will eat our own meals and drink our own wine. Besides, Daxia Sun and I are both martial arts practitioners. Sun Deng raised the wine bowl first and smiled. That's true, let's take one. Qin Pingan raised the wine bowl and said, looking back, Daxia Sun went to my side of Luapa Mountain, and I personally cook and fry some dishes with wine. Sun Deng first smiled and said, with this sentence, it is the best dish for wine. The previous sentence, the money of the poor is sweaty palms. Sun Deng was finally able to make sure of one thing. The young Qin Shanju in front of him was not a child of a family, he was really poor. When I met Sun Dengxian and his party back then, it was like a kind of verification that gave Qin Pingan a reassurance. I walked the rivers and lakes so carefully, it was right. On a larger scale, it proves that there is nothing wrong with Qin Pingan's carefulness in words and deeds in this strange world very different from his hometown. It's just these words in the heart that neither Qin Pingan nor anyone mentioned. I met Sun Daxia today and I haven't drunk it yet, so I can't say it for the time being. It's like a sermon with both self-evidence and other evidence. In the corridor, the Holy Master smiled and said, I have been exposed so soon. The Bixiao cave master, who has a high level of cultivating seniority, is of course not limited to the 14th realm of the combination of Taoism. It is more complicated than Qin Pinggan's guess. There are not only the prayers of the time, but also the constraints of geographical advantages, but also the actions of people and actions. But the three can be merged into one, so it is still a very interesting path. In the early years after a world divided the four worlds, many young 14th and Ascendant mountain monks of course, would be very curious about the old master of the first ascent, and how he numbered and why instead of staying in the wild world, he ran into the Howran world and became an outlier. The great monks speculated about this, and after thinking about it for hundreds of thousands of years, they could only think of Qin Pinggan. Lu Yin said, "The books of later generations are widely circulated. To a certain extent, Qin Pinggan has taken advantage of it." The Holy Master sighed, "Is it so difficult to admit that a young junior has a bright mind?" And this seemed to have exactly the same tone as that of the old scholar. But judging by the seniority and age of both parties, maybe when Sheng has learned how to learn and got the essence? Lu Yin shook his head and said with a smile, "Pan Dao doesn't underestimate Qin Pinggan. I looked at him at the hostel on the left side of Handan Road before." The most sage master insisted on his own opinion, still saying, "You have it." Lu Yin felt helpless. The most sacred ancestor is a master of all ages, so don't embarrass Lu Yin as a man in the door. The most sage master smiled and asked, "Do you think Qin Pinggan has guessed the identity of Lu Sheng?" Lu Yin replied, "It's hard to tell." The most sage master said, "Although that ancient sword pill is not a rare treasure, it can still be regarded as the word excellent. Fellow Chunyang Taoist, do you think Qin Pinggan takes it? Come to refine it yourself or give it away." Lu Yin said, "You are too greedy and can't chew. Most of it is a gift." The Holy Master smiled and said, "You can bite the roots of the vegetables, eat a lot of hardships, there are no taboos, everything can be done." LV Yin said with emotion, "The cultivator is the most selfish. It's just that people are selfless, how to seek Taoism and become immortal. The greatest desire is to live long, and then to live long and finally live with the heavens and the earth." Master Jisheng said, "Hey, do you like Daoist Chunyang scolding yourself or scolding me, or are you scolding together?" Lu Yin shook his head and said, "Just say it casually. It's inevitable to be melancholy about to travel far. The green hills and white clouds of my hometown, small bridges and flowing water, are waiting for the wanderers in the distance to return home. It seems that when the day breaks, when you wake up from a dream, you will open your eyes and see the sound of flower sales everywhere." How tough is Lu Yan's Dao heart, and he quickly abetted this faint melancholy. He was also quite curious. The sword repair of the wild woman with the pseudonym Bai Jing is better than a strange Taoist friend? The Holy Master nodded and said, "That's a pretty fierce woman with high swordsmanship. It's just that Xiaomo is also very embarrassed. Faced with this kind of entanglement, he can't always face Bai Jingzhen's life and death when he asks the sword. Otherwise it annoys Xiaomo. Once a certain natal flying sword is sacrificed, Bai Jing will also be embarrassed. Just saying that the chase that year was really a fight, or Yang Ji and Zhu Wei would suffer even more, 3 soaring and 2 deaths. One injury is an inescapable end. In the wild world, Zhu is tired of that kind of serious injury, but in fact it is no different from death. Being a swordsman who protects the way, Xiao Mo can certainly do a good job, but being a dead man is the most veritable. So a certain predecessor's picking eyesight has been very good since ancient times. However, Jianxiu Bai Jing, a bit like Xiao Yan from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, prefers a pure and unrestrained manner. Back then, Qin Qing was in the Great Wall of Jianqi and couldn't control Xiao Yan. Now that Bai Zhe has returned to the barren world, he may not be able to control Bai Jing. It's not too much to control, it's just a kind of respect or a kind of understanding similar to the elders to the younger ones. The sky is high and the earth is wide, and go free. Sword of Coming Chapter 933. After the mountains there are many exotic flowers, but there are no birds and ants. Moreover, Qin Ping found a small incident. He had previously entered the Xianxia mansion and saw the cranes hovering around the mountains. After the 4 people climbed, the cranes had disappeared. No matter whether Qin Ping looked up at the foot of the mountain, he overlooked the mountains and rivers in the foothills. Later, after the Huangshi and Sun Dao people searched for treasure, until the back mountain, Qin Pinggan never saw a trace of the crane. If there is such a place in the world, and the assumption is a worst result, the owner of this place is ill-intentioned to all visitors. Then the other party is definitely a master of calculations. The ordinary folks, the wilderness of the mountain, are eager to enter this mountain, and the blind crane will be given up. It is more shocked by the subsequent white jade arch bridges and arches. It is regarded as a paradise on earth, plus the bones of the bones everywhere. Naturally, it is considered to be no land. For those who practice the Tao, those inadvertent sights are true, especially at the first sight, which will affect the mind more quietly and unaware. In the future, as long as it is a practicing Qi, regardless of the level of the realm, it will be repeatedly scrutinized. At the first sight, Qin Pingan saw the green mountains and green waters and the snow-white cranes. It was no exception. The first thought that came to life was a good fairy house, so good for a mountain. After seeing all the way, it is nothing more than a suffix of the ruins outside the Xianxia mansion. The fairy family is still a fairy family and Fuyuan is still a blessing. The clues everywhere, extremely complicated, it seems to be a mystery everywhere. Seeing more, it will make people feel a mess, lazy thinking. Qin Pingan also has not had a lot of clues, but the savage abrupt rises like a lift. Once the crane is a kind of delicate eye-catching method, plus the bells of the Sundao people's waist that are unexploded for no reason, then reluctantly you can pull out a line or the worst possibility. This kind of look at the best and the worst of the two sides of the line first, is the key to Qin Pingan's ability to live out of the bones and valleys of the Skull Beach in Beijing. The world is complicated, seeing and not seeing, thinking and not wanting, is learning, it is hard work. Of course, there are also mistakes that have been misunderstood. It is nothing but ignorance and death or a confused chance. The three people continue to travel to the back of the mountain. Compared to the death of the former mountain, at least it seems that it is really a lot of leisure. As for the life and death of Di Yuanfeng, Qin Pingan did not have a little burden. It's not that she is not an ancestor. If she is a person who has a good mind, Qin Pingxing will still manage a tube and make a fair sale. At the moment there is a green bamboo on the side of the road. It is quite eye-catching, falling in the eyes of three people, lonely and bitter and bamboo shadows. The bamboo raft is as thick as a bowl, and the bamboo leaves are green and dripping, and it is not a rhetorical statement. It is a veritable green scent. Many bamboo leaves have pointed leaves, condensation and water droplets. The wind blows over and is faltering. At the time of this bamboo, just a drop of green water drops fell into the mud, and instantly dissipated. Qin Pingan looked at it with great attention. Although it was not the green glazed tile and the Taoist brick, it gave birth to the essence of water transport, but it also reached the aura. Exaggerated. When Sundao was passing by, he tapped it with his finger, listened to it and snorted, saying, "There is a doorway." When Qin Ping stared at the green bamboo, he turned and took off the parcel. He took the sword from the ruler, held it in his hand and rewrapped the parcel. Then he smiled and said, "Working with the grandson, shaking the bamboo, I take some bamboo leaves and tip water." After all, Sun Daoren is a true-looking monk in the sea. He can see the depth and shake his head and smile. "Qin Dao, you advise you not to do more." The bamboo leaves and water drops that these auras gave birth to, the ordinary utensils cannot keep this rich aura. Mo said that it is directly holding the jug to fill the water. If you pick up a bamboo leaf and even drop the water, carefully store it. If you leave this weird bamboo, you can't keep it. The high-thickness person said this, and did not delay him to take off the robe and take out a celadone vial with a picture of the hermit. Huang Shi suspected that the two men were tempered, and one foot squatted on the bamboo pole. The water droplets fell like a light rain. The Sundao people laughed and their body shape shook, and they stepped on the foot, and filled the water with a plum-green porcelain bottle. Qin Pingan is no exception. He does not want any water droplets to fall apart. Without competing with Sundao, many water droplets that are about to fall into the mud will be pooled into a line. Slow and come and raise the sword. Huang Shi squinted at the old man's tactics and did not see any flaws that were doubtful. Since Qin Pingan took out the sword, he no longer put it up, hanging it around his waist, and the water droplets of the heavens and the earth condensed together, but the weight of the 7 or 8 wines was a gloomy weight of 10 kilograms. The three continued on their way. Qin Ping looked back at the green bamboo. Is it like the bamboo forest that Wei Wei carefully planted in Kaidenshan? If it is really necessary to recognize the ancestors, it is from the Qingshan mountain in Zhuhai Dongtian? Otherwise, according to the book of the immortal book purchased from the Hanging Mountain in the same year, many of the fairy bamboos in the world are dozens of different kinds. In the case of condensing water and transportation, it seems that the bamboo gods are not so vast. It's a pity that, like the chessboard stone table, you can't move away. Sun Daoren felt that he was still not happy. He reached out and smiled. He said, "Bamboo is open to the gods, light and qi, poor roads practiced in the early years, and throughout the books I have seen ancient books, bamboo leaves boiled tea, the most thirst in the heart of the Qing dynasty, You only need to use a bamboo leaf to hold the grip, plus a few lotus seeds on the mountain, 1 or 2 cups of tea underwater belly. You have to teach people to float like a fairy. Qin Pingan blinded the eyes of the Sun Dao, and looked at the slender green bamboo that did not move to the face. Since this is all the case, then there is something to be said. He can't really open his mouth. Sun Dao Rin took back his hand and looked indifferently. Forget it, this opportunity is reserved for later generations. Huang Shi falls down the stone road. These bamboo leaves, if they are the 5 sects of the water law, refining and refining as the life, cannot be the treasure. The treasure is in front of the eyes. Be careful not to take the blame. Sun Daochang really does not pick how many? It is a younger generation that is not used to make tea and is given to the baby's mountain mine house. It is also a good gift to return to the teacher's door. Sun Dao Rin Yun Xiaofeng said, the practice of monasticism involves the fundamentals, and you can give away the opportunity. I am not a preacher of the younger generation. The gift is too heavy but not beautiful. It is nothing. Qin Pingan whispered, Sun Dao's long words are like beads and they are thought-provoking. Sun Daorin carefully put the celadone vial into the sleeve, slowly moving, smiling and unpredictable. Some of the Huangshi masters couldn't stand this Wuling national sanctuary. From the beginning to the end, after learning that Sun Dao was a disciple of Lei Xin's house, Jingming, he was very diligent in Sun Dao's side. Huang Shi suddenly took the golden body of the body, and then used the strength of the 5 realms, a little bit of mercy, and after measuring the other person's body, he punched the black robe without warning. The old man, screaming, the latter flew out, tumbling all the way, struggling to get up, seemed to be beaten, sitting on the ground. Suddenly his throat frowned, turned his head and spit out a blood, as if he had just returned to God, stood up. The hands are hidden in the sleeves. Apparently they are already at the fingertips. The air machine lingers around the cuffs and smashes. The surname is yellow. Can you find death? Huang Shi's heart is big. It really is a waste. Sun Dao Rin was even scared to rush out of the tens of thousands of feet, but also grabbed a rifle that had just been bought with Qin Daoyu. The 3 men showed a horn. Huang Shi did not look at the old man in black robes. He just turned his head and smiled at Sun Dao. Sun Daochang, people are sneaky, have to guard against it. We are with Qin Gongzi, so it is an ally who knows the roots, but this person halfway encounter, if it is a scourge of the top of the garlic, we are not in the way. In the end, all the treasures of the body take a life, marry others. I don't want Sun Daochang. Sun Daorin's words are in the heart of the lake, and Qin Ping's words, Qin Daoyu, how do you say, do you want to kill one? This Huang Shi is not good at it. If it's really tearing the skin, the 2 brothers are a grasshopper on the line who don't hide. In comparison, Sun Dao Rin is of course more convinced of the old black robe all the way down, has some relationship with good and evil. The relationship is not big, more still feel that Qin Daoyu, the road is weak, the threat is not big. Of course, if the old man of the black robe is behaving and acting, the shrewd and savvy city is everywhere. It is a matter of seeing the wind and the rudder. Sun Dao people are not willing to cooperate with them, bet their lives and confront the Huangshi together. So with Qin Ping's heartfelt words, Sun Dao's mouth is talking about the words of the paste. Qin Daoyu, Huang loudest move is too much, but now the situation is unpredictable. It's better to make a wedding dress for others. It's better for both of you to sell a poor face. Qin Daoyu's a little bit of peace, and the poor road will let Huang's younger brother apologize, just as this matter has been turned over. How? Qin Pingan angered and sweared, nothing. After smashing such a punch, I suffered such an innocent disaster. I'm so badly hurt. If I apologize and finish, it is better to let the Huangshi eat me array and it will be even. Huang Shi pulled the corner of his mouth, opened the corner of the parcel, grabbed a piece of utensils, and gently threw it at the old man in the black robe. He smiled, there is not enough compensation, then add a gift. I saw that the old man in the black robe had a bright eye and hesitated a little. He still had a hand in his sleeve and secretly smashed his hand. He had already raised his hand in his hand and tried to reach out to catch the antique bronze mirror. Sun Dao people changed their minds and quickly reminded them, don't pick up. It's just late. Huang Shi stepped on the ground and took the martial arts of the 6 peaks. He came to the old man in front of the black robe and gave a punch. The old man in the black robe was stunned. He was in the same place and the whole person was stiff. Not only could he not catch the bronze mirror of the courtesy, but he had to suffer from the punch. Only Huang Shi suddenly stopped his fist, only a burst of punches over the face of the poor worm, the hair of the horns swept back. Huang Shi actually received the punch, turned the heavy bag, turned and left after a few steps, turned and smiled, Qin brother, this bronze mirror sent you. Sun Dao people lamented in their hearts. How did I find such a long-lost demented ally? bitter also. The next road it is not good to go. Sun Daoren only saw the Qin Dao Yu smiled apologetically, squatting down, picking up the bronze mirror that fell to the ground, and stuffing it into a dry blue cloth package. Even if this guy has tried to hide his timidity, he can still tremble with his hands. Sun Dao people saw a straight headache, shook his head, turned to follow the Huang Shi. Perhaps it was a bit sad for this guy, his unfortunate anger and his heartfelt resentment. Qin Dao Yu. Next, remember your position, don't be too close to yellow this guy. It is best to let yourself and the Huang Shi be separated by a poor road, or if you are close to the yellow master, you will have more and more symbols, and how can you not let the pure Wufu close? This is not easy to understand. Sun Daochang, I understand the truth, but I really have a dry shoulder with the yellow master. I have a blank mind and my hands and feet don't listen. It's really a footstep that can't keep up with these reasons. After the man got a bronze mirror, he quickly followed the Sun Dao, slowed down, and did not walk side by side with Sun Dao, just behind Sun Dao, and he followed suit. Sun Dao sighed and said nothing more. It's a good idea to eat along wise and not to be saved. Qin Ping went to the end and gently wiped the blood on his lips. Wu Wu is not a bad luck, and he is often beaten with blood. Qin Pingan is good and he has to come by himself. However, when I thought of the bronze mirror that was very old, Qin Ping had no grievances. The essays are extremely small, with the front being the arrogant pawn, and the back being the fighting squad. The mirror of cult is undoubted, and it is an antique mirror, because Qin Ping's previous careful examination revealed the extremely subtle Miyagi, but this is the most valuable. Because dare to be above the bronze mirror, quietly adding the word, making to the surname is the guarantee of the rank. The Book of the Gods has been recorded in the relevant literature. Among them, the Li Pu made on the ancient mirror of the sea beast grape, the light mirror or the Nalan Sanshan made on the fairy night mirror. The antique mirror is the most valuable city. As for the later generations of bronze mirrors that are similar to imitation, it is often a trick to sneak a slap in the air. Even if it is very ingenious, it is still a big pit. If someone thinks that they are missing the treasure, it is better to sell the high price. It is estimated that the monks can repent and vomit blood. Fang Kai Qinping almost did not hold back. Wanna let the Sun Dao people touch the touch first, the name of the United States to help palms, and they are now in the bag. The hand of Sun Daochang and the fight with Yu Jingqing have passed the light? Regardless of this harvest, it is very likely that the Dragon King Bamboo Whip's small cage only said that the string of pagoda bells hanging around the waist of the high thin road, obviously not a product. Otherwise, outside the mountain road view, the string of pagoda bells will never actively break the warning. On the back of the mountain, the building is far less than the front mountain of the row, and it is quite spectacular. There are only a handful of them. The three men all the way down the mountain looking into the distance, sparse. It also saves a lot of trouble. In accordance with the old rules, the Yellow Master searched for a treasure, near a palace building group in front of him. Sun Dao people went to another place. There was a building high. Qin Pingan was assigned to the most nearby temple. After Qin Pingan and Sun Dao were separated, they were not in a hurry. It was like a leisurely walk in the mountains and waters. They took off the swords and took a bamboo leaf, which was really refreshing. The taste is faint, and there is no taste of alcohol. Just think of this auspicious green bamboo leaf tip dripping water. The gold is rare, the price is far better than the Xinjia wine. Suddenly feels the taste is very beautiful, the aftertaste is endless. This mouth goes down. Drinking is not a tea but a lot of fairy money. Can you not taste delicious? Looking back, I can't see the traces of Huang Shi and Sun Dao. Qin Ping will not raise the sword, and his body will be swaying, suddenly rushing past the high wall and floating. As if it fits in with the heavens and the earth, it can be so silent and uninteresting. At the foot of the mountain, the white jade arch bridge, there is a melee. With the customary words of Beiju Luzhou, it is that the brain is used as a drink and it is a true hero. The bridge-breaking battle that met the narrow road was very fierce. Even the royal family of the Fuzhou kingdom, who was looking for treasure on the mountain, heard the movement and had to give up the treasures that were at their fingertips and rushed to the battlefield. However, the Fugua country enshrined more than one mind, and selected some treasures that were worthy of value. They were hidden in a loft room beam. The rest of the objects were wrapped together and moved slightly to the corner of the house. Returning with Bai Yu and Xiao Ho Yi will not reveal the slightest foot. As for how to bring the treasures of the treasure out of the place, one step at a time is. Gao Ling has taken out the arsenal of the arsenal, and a pair of gods have been exposed to the body, and joined hands with the Hofu family to protect Zhan Qing's safety. And Zhan Qing, the teacher of Yuan Ying's master of the Yuan's ancestors, was also pretending to be panic-stricken, and the North Pagoda's slogans I, combined with the previous swear words, was very useful and almost no one believed it. The children of the biting national power will be a real 5-level monk and have 2 powerful weapons of attack. The situation of the one-sided battle situation, after the Fuxia state enshrined to join, it slightly regained some disadvantages. Jianghu hated the woman monk who wore the power fence and wore the robes of the city on the cloud. It was this person who took the lead in crossing the bridge and broke his plan to make a fortune. Not only that, the Tibetan woman who was hiding in the Tibetan head was extremely measured in the subsequent slaughter. She did not catch up with the golden body, but she would not sit on the mountain and let the monks and Wufu die. Every time Jialing can punch and kill, the female repairer has to stalk from it. Less than a fragrant martial arts, she took 2 defensive treasures from Jialing and the family to worship Wufu, and saved the lives of 7 or 8 people. The woman repaired 2 pieces of defensive life. One piece was a cyan jade bracelet that was circulated by Baoguang. It was indefinite, and a bright yellow color clouded gold and embroidered 5 dragons sat, even if it was a boxing and jailing, but it was hollowed down and hunting. The ringing can't break it, but after a punch, the luster of the 5 golden dragons tends to be a bit faint, but the jade bracelet and the sitting ring take turns to sit back and smash back into her key gas house, soaked by the aura. After that, the golden luster will soon be restored. The siege of more than 40 people, the treasures of all people's attack and punishment are all out, and the momentum is huge. If it is not for the monks to cooperate with the strangers, some of the pure Wufus of the 4 borders and 5 realms will not dare to fight too close, mostly by bows. Far attack or handing out boxing and attacking the bridge across the bank between each other cannot be closely connected. Jailing and other people may be more difficult to cope. However, once Yamazawa's wilderness chooses to fight, not to mention Jianghu, who is not seen in blood, is the Jailing who was born in the military and is envied with the family who used to be in the Hofu. When the Hofu family was enshrined, they were attacked by secret treasures. They pierced the abdomen and the blood flow was not limited. They only relied on Wufujin's body to hold a sigh of relief, and instead of jailing, they were good at fighting, and they were trapped by the army of guns and forests. No stranger, so it is still a surprise. As for the royal offering of the Fugwa state, it was even more miserable. It was smashed by a slashing weapon. If jailing helped the majority of the boxing, this person was also given the secret fan of Jianghu's hand in front of him. Out of the air there was a fairy screen on the snowy night road, but the old Fuxi was about to die on the spot. It's just that Jailing, the 2 golden martial arts, is not vegetarian. Even if there is a colorful bird's martial arts to help fight the boxing, it's still killing as many as 7 or 8 people. The death is miserable, no exception, just like the execution. The 5 horses on the corpse. Therefore, the spur of the water dragon Zongdan Dancian White Rush came, not the icing on the cake but the charcoal in the snow. It's just that Bai Hao has just sacrificed 1 attack and 1 defense against 2 pieces of the magic weapon. Then there is Sun Qingyu, the young housekeeper of Kaik House, who took the initiative to choose to fight against this big brother. The shape of the white stork is surrounded by a set of 18 water dragons and ancestral temples. The white enamel itself is a genius monk who is naturally suitable for practicing the water law, and those who spend money in essays have a deep meaning and a hint of the remnant national movement, which was once the opening of the coins of an ancient dynasty, was scattered around the earth, both on the ancient Taoist temples, in the ancient tombs, or in the later royal treasury collected by the Shuilongzong. In 2 sets, 18 pieces were made up and 1 of them was given to the day. In fact, this set of water in the Shuilongzongzu temple is a good object to win the money, both offensive and defensive. However, Baiyu still sacrificed a mountain weight, which is the proud work of a Qinqin sage in the history of Luzhou, and the Guqin is called snow. After the 2 Jindan monks shot, the battle became more intense. There was another hoarse voice of 1,000 knives, and everyone was loudly reminded, "We will kill Xiahui first." Jianghu is very angry. This guy is really difficult. After a few words of speaking, there are 4 or 2 effects. It was only the other party who apparently used a secret law on the mountain, plus the thrill of killing, and became a pot of porridge so that Jianghu could not clearly identify the person. The military commander Gao Ling and the 2 enshrines will not dare to watch their own being killed by the technique and artifacts. However, once they take care of him too much, it is inevitable that they will lose sight of each other. Once there is a leak, it will easily hurt the whole body. I have to be distracted by the white. Jianghu dare to assert that as long as he is killed in a golden body, or someone is seriously injured, temporarily lost his strength, he has to withdraw from the battlefield and return to the mountains. Wild Repair and Wufu will definitely fight more. In fact, Jianghu actually reminded Jailing and the 2 enshrines from the beginning. Every time they join forces to kill people if they can, it is best to pick one or two, and to beat a group of 3 or 4 people to kill the hills and kill them. It has a shocking effect. It can prevent the other party from revenge for friends, and become a desperate person. It is just that people are not as good as days. Zhan Qing has a lot of calculations. The result may be that the time went out without turning the yellow calendar. It can be said that everything is not smooth, and later, Gao Ling with the 2 offerings, it is no longer possible to be so cautious. I am looking for the target to kill people here. The other person has more people, but regardless of the 3 or 71, the chaotic weapons, the insidious sinister techniques, the first brains come over and say. Until this moment, Zhan Qingkai began to regret that he should not be so conceited. It will be an easy task to explore all the opportunities in the local area. It should be gradual, and each breaks. Instead of feeling that this group of people, it is not difficult to fight together to kill a Yuaning, why bother with a group of arrogant ants? The result is that when Zhan Qing swayed and blocked everyone's way, he learned the number of the novels that Wan Fu was unable to open, and then began to chew Huanglian. In fact, it is not that Zhan Qing's previous calculations were worse. It's just a way of practicing, one in case it's really coming, and when things are coming it's 10,000 things. Bai Hao suddenly found himself in the water dragon ancestor Chuanjin Dan, actually lost to the eyes of this young woman repairing the face. Bai Hao angered with a heart-colored house Sun Qin. Do you dare to kill me? I am not afraid of enmity with my Shulongzong, a peach blossom crossing Kaik house, can withstand the 5 palms of my family? The reason why the day is not directly loudly preached. In the end, it is the origin of the genealogy of the singer. Compared with the wild Yamazawa field repair, there are more scruples and more trade-offs. Sun Qing drove the attacking magic weapon, and the snowflakes that were produced by the Guqin snow-splitting strings were smashed, and then smiled and replied, "What are you talking about? How can I not understand?" White is very annoyed. Sun Qing. You really want to die with me? There are those 18 pressures to protect the surrounding area, and the white crickets are not too embarrassing to deal with them. What's more, this set of magic weapons, both offensive and defensive, is obvious. Bai Hao has not done all the best, let alone the ancestor of the ancestral head. There is no 1 or 2 of the finale for the jade to burn or to escape the miles. Therefore, the shameful anger of Bai Yu is more similar to Zhan Qing's state of mind. He has lost a good pattern of exclusive interests, and has no face of a large Jin Dan monk. However, Zhan Qing, who is already in danger, is white. The current situation is much better. Sun Qing still does not accept the account, smiled and said, "We are unconcerned Yamazawa wild repair, pay attention to a person who is dead, not dead for thousands of years." It is really too deceiving for a woman to say this. The white scorpion took a deep breath, and suddenly the mood was as quiet as water, and there was no more distracting thoughts. Even the situation of Zhan Qing could not be ignored at all. Since the generality of the priest is not reasonable, and both sides are Jindan's peers, they can only see the true chapter in the cultivation. Although Sun Qing is self-confident, it is far more relaxed than the white dragon, the one who has been in the golden dragon for a few days. In fact, the youngest Jindan housekeeper in the history of the colorful birdhouse has not slackened. In the face of a young genius of a fairy tales with a profound slogan, Sun Qing is waiting for an opportunity. The timing of a one-shot blow, if it is not successful, is when the 2 sides sit down to talk about the fairy. If the other side is 1 foot high, kill her. Sun Qing. Sun Qing also feels nothing. I can kill people, people can kill me. Therefore, the sword repair, which is like a teacher, will only say the sentence when traveling together. No one in the world can die. However, the land dragon of the Luzhou in that year actually said the latter part, but everyone in the world can make sense. In the latter half of the sentence, Sun Qing has not been able to listen in and feel that there is no reason. Just like him, I want fight with him. Of course, I really want to arguing with Lu Jinglong, and I am sure to ask for it. Nothing beats him. When Lu Jinglong was the Jin Danjian, he used his mouth to tell the truth and persuaded a jade-like monster who planned to open the ring. Not only that, but he also became an enemy and friend with the old monster. The old monsters in turn avenged their entourage for a group of people, and they sent their ceremonies out of the country. The last time Sun Qing and Lu Jinglong occupied, after the guests were chilling, some did not talk. She asked the matter casually. Lu Jinglong said that before going south, he met with the old predecessor and talked very happy, just want him. After Lu Jinglong's return to the north, he returned to the Taiji Jianzong retreat with peace of mind and no need to run a mountain. Qin Ping's place to visit, there are not many bones on the ground, and the heart slams in silence, then squats on the ground, gently licking the hand bones, still the same as the secular bones, no sacral beaches are stained by the yin, the corpse appears a white vision. The same is true of the former mountain. This means that the local monk, who had almost no real people before his death, had at least not become a celestial being, and there was a quirky gazebo on the stone table, and the two sides of the game clearly showed that the ranks of the robe were excellent. After being stripped by the Yellow Master, Qin Pingan discovered that the two bodies were still without the golden dragon of Jinzui. Wherever Qin Ping went, the winding path was quiet, still aura, and there was no sense of discomfort. So Qin Pingan wasted another yang light symbol. Qin Ping's harvest was awkward. There were only a few cracked mountain artifacts. It should be done with Sun Daochang. Came to a dry pond, the dead leaves are defeated. It seems that if the water is full, it should be a place of spring. Qin Pingan has been thinking about the writings at the entrance to the cavern. The person who keeps the words must be a person who has entered the site of this fairyland. Either the hidden world is leaving clues for future generations, or it can only be afraid that the fish is too stupid, even the bait cannot bite, cannot be hooked. Qin Pingan turned over the railing and jumped into the pond. The dead leaves were broken and there was no mystery. After the mountain's water transport aura, it is still the thickest near the green bamboo. Luoshan is missing a good bamboo. If you can be like the ancestors of the eternal cherished by Wei Wei in the past, the year after year the branches and leaves are scattered, the bamboo whip is stretched under the ground, the son of the son of the grandson, you can have a new one. Maolin Xiuzhu came. Of course, in the eyes of Qin Ping, there is nothing missing in Luoshan. Qin Pingan slightly smashed the soil and quickly turned it into crumbs at the fingertips. Regarding the northern part of Luzhou, the peace of mind, Qin Pingan knows not much. It's just that there are more insiders in the world, the rise and fall of the temple's incense and the historical changes. I only heard that Wei Wei mentioned that there was an east-west rush to the sea, and there were 30,000 miles in the east. Whenever the mountains and rivers meet, there will be a sage and a sage. There is also a drowning water in the Fuzhou Island. It was broken by a large water with only the river suffix, and it took a big break into the sea. From then on, the whole big raft was broken. In just 300 years, a big cockroach disappeared. This means that all the water gods and hippo of that big scorpion will dissipate in the golden body, and the ceremonial rules of the sacred monks along the way are extremely complicated, far more than a landscape in the ruling territory of the dynasty monarch. It is necessary to submit documents to the Confucian school of Middle-earth. Qin Ping looked around and didn't move. He took off his sword and took a sip. He sighed and sighed all the water in the sword. Then he was soaked in thoughts and thoughts like a mustard. I saw that the water gate was wide open, but it was not closed. At the foot of Qin Ping's foot, there is a green river. From the hundreds of miles, a line of water gradually gathers and becomes a stream, which slowly flows into the pond of Shuifu. The busy green children, they did not look at one of the biggest heroes who came to visit, and flew one by one, and they were elated. This picture shows that Qin Ping is somewhat sad, and he is so proud of himself. The little guy estimates that he is really scared. Qin Pingan went to the mountain to look at it. In fact, there is a more slender stream in the waterhouse. It flows to the key acupoint where the mountain is located. This water is trapped in the waterhouse because of the essence of water transport. It will be clear and colorless, and there will be no sorrowful green color. These thick and watery auras will begin to seep into the ground after the mountain where the mountains are located, such as the rain infiltrating the earth. When Qin Pingi pondered, he quit his heart and no longer stayed in this treasure-free house. With a road and footsteps of Qin Daoyu, he ran all the way and sneaked to the tree. It is very likely that it was from Qingshan Mountain. The green bamboo, the palm of the hand holding the bamboo pole, gently shocked, the green bamboo then gently shakes up, and then holds the sword, and the sleeves will condense the leaves of the remaining half of the bamboo leaves, all of which are included in the sword. Qin Pingan is quite content. It really is a flawed expert. Then Qin Pingan did not raise the sword and began to climb the bamboo. He just didn't think that the slender bamboo branches that could be cut off by the children could not be easily folded. Qin Ping looked at the palace in the distance. The Yellow Master stood on a wall and had been looking at it for a long time. Qin Ping, who was after knowing, grinned and waved. Huang Shi stepped out and fell back to the ground. It's a poor pity that wants money to be crazy, but has no way to make money. Without the spy of the Yellow Master, Qin Ping tried to bend the bamboo branches and took off the bamboo leaves. With his current cultivation he could barely do it. He took one after another and stuffed it into one. Among the slanting shackles, the hard stalks rely on the bamboo leaves to hold the dry wraps to the bulging sack. I changed to a place where I continued to look at the Wufu Huangshi, who was in the distance. The person who was in the distance was obsessed with it. If this kind of person is a legendary high-profile person, his yellow master will put his neck toward Xuanhuan, put a knife on it. When the Huang Shi really left, Qin Pingan began to put his fingers together, lightning shots, cutting high and low bamboo branches and quickly earning income. Among the squares and squats, the green glazed tiles and the large blocks of bricks can't be really loaded, just use these slender bamboo branches to fill those gaps. After you've done it, you're a good person and a square. This is a veritable full of life. Qin Pingan holds the green bamboo and stays there. He has not slipped to the ground for a long time. I vaguely remembered the time when I was young and climbed the tree with two people. One is the most good friend who is accustomed to protecting him, and the other is half of his loved ones who are used to protecting him. At that time, it seems that the days are too poor, but every year, month, year and year, no worries. Qin Ping sighed. Take back your thoughts. Soon after, there was a voice in the distance. Qin brother? What? Qin Pingan turned his head and looked at it. Haha smiled. The upper side is cool and the scenery is good. It is the Diyuan seal of the pseudonym Qin Jiyuan, whose face is slightly white, and it should be a minor injury. Jiyuan giant python? Isn't it the best mountain monkey under the sun? So the name is a bit languid. Diyuanfeng no longer looked at the old man in the black robe who was in the water. He looked at the nearest palace building and asked, "How is Sun Daochang and Huang brothers harvested?" Qin Pingan laughed and said, "Oh, all are good." Diyuanfeng couldn't help but squint at the old guy who was holding the bamboo. The two parcels that were staggered and squatted, not the tiles or the bricks. How, the old man, are you anxious to go home to build a housewife? Unfortunately, Qin Pingan can't guess the voice of this person. Otherwise, I really want to give a thumbs up from the heart, and sincerely admire the true God. The old real man has already returned with full load, and one piece of the symbol is already full. On the cloud, the city's dragon gates were old and full of content, and they were almost satisfied. They carried a large bag and held two parcels in their hands, which could not cover their faces. After the two old men met, they stood on the top floor of a loft and overlooked the battle of the mountain gate. The old offering smiled and said, "A good dog bites a dog." Xiaoyun smiled and said nothing. On the road of practice, it is often a slow step and slow pace. The two rumored disciples of xianxia, if they did not have their own way of guarding, first entered this place, and once they were late in biting, they were crossing the bridge. Just the same can only be beaten under the risk. Only the eyes of Jingyun were unique, and they suddenly saw the clues of the two monks of the Kaik house. Most of them were the fairy sons and grandsons, and they were martial arts with the masters. As for the young woman who is in the air and holding the guqin of the sages and the weather, it is obvious that it is the snow piano. However, this piano was the original life of a water dragon sect of the Shuilongzong. Once there was an earth-shattering killing, with the guqin in the locality, it was actually a breath of a fellow old Yuaning. In today's Shui Longzong Jin Dan female repairs, she played the unique magical power of the guqin. The old offering whispered softly, "Then we are going around the road to the algae well, quietly leaving? Or go to the back hill to take a look?" Xiaoyun smiled and said, "We are guardians, let the two children make decisions. We only need to hide the body shape, do not take the initiative to drown, this trip should be worry-free." The clouds smashed the sky and the sky was moving down. It was the border of this small world. What the white scorpion perceives, the old real person has certainly confirmed it earlier. Just at the entrance to the algae well, he secretly buried a hidden symbol under the ground. As long as there is no difference in the symbol, it means that the retreat is still there. Moreover, although the mysteriousness of this place is heavy, the meteorology does not seem to be filthy and evil, and there is no trace of suffocation. This makes the old real people feel relieved. Landscapes, mountains and rivers are the most difficult to fake. Let you be the Yamazawa big demon of Yuan Ingjing, create a fairyland secret of a flower cluster, and fall in the eyes of Jingyun, who is skilled in fushi, can still find clues and detect early. The road to the world of Howren, in fact, many factions in the early days, is a great scene of flowers. It's just that many of today's huge sidelines are already fragrant, not climate or simply lost. For example, once the most prosperous Zong Tadeo Jianxian, it is a real big weather. At that time, the Beiju Luzhou, even if the sword is repaired like a cloud, the sword fairy is standing, can still say that he occupies the world. Minute. In the early years of the mountain, the four great stalks of ghosts, Taoist sword fairy will occupy a place, and sword repair, sickle people, and said that the world there was no teacher knife room, Taoism swordsmanship, never repaired by sword. After seeing the change of the door, Jinyun looked at the flesh and blood of the foot of the mountain and was stunned. In the eyes of the old real people, the chances of fighting for the life of the mountain gate should be the younger generation, the age of the child. The old real person did not come to think of a poet, xianxia, who had said that he was in the eyes of a young man. Later poets read this sentence. They have a note. Rugged is the anti-sense of the scorpion, so this language breaks the human feelings, the rugged path of the human heart, far from the steep roads of mountains and deep miles. Jinyun remembered the greed and murder of his own, and he was helpless. In the eyes of the three saints, who is not the boy in their eyes? Jinyun suddenly said, "You go to protect them to the next generation to find opportunities." The old man went to the foot of the mountain to persuade the shelf. A few deaths are a few. The old offerings are stopped. After thinking about it, after weighing the balance, I also understood that the old real person had a good intention and nodded. Unless the people on the cloud go to the city to leave quickly, or when the mess at the foot of the mountain, especially if the accidental death of the Shuolongzong rumor, the wrath of the thunder of the 5 dragons on the Shuolongzong will fall from the sky. Biting country and Fufu state. Kaik house Yun Shangqing, one can't run. Perhaps whoever benefits more today will bear more. In addition, if the old real person can help the two sides who are in a stalemate to make a solution, let the two sides sit down and discuss a decent plan. This is the incense that Jinyun has earned. Shuolongzong, Kaik house, biting Guhufu will recognize it. Jinyun handed out a plaque and handed it to the old man who was on the cloud. He smiled and said, "If there is trouble, I will rush to the plaque." The old door of the long men was enshrined, and it disappeared. The mood of Jinyun is actually not easy. This is to get rid of the paste. When you are a good gentleman, don't be fooled into it. It becomes a boring crowbar on both sides. After the clouds came out and shot. Don't help on both sides, and both sides help, and they are all in one, and they try to stop the two groups from continuing to kill. At the same time, moving with emotion, knowing the truth, said that there are many opportunities on the mountain. If it is still trustworthy, he can climb the treasure hunt together. Why bother to kill here? Both lose. The original chaos situation was like a river, and it was diverted into a big lake, so it quickly became calm. In particular, Jinyun shouted 5 people and secretly negotiated. Among them are biting Guxiao Hao Zhanqing, Kaikfu Sunqing, Shuelong Zongbai, and many of the most powerful 2 leading figures in Yamazawa. In this way they negotiated a charter that took a step back on both sides of the arch bridge. Of course, Zhanqing and Baiyu relegated more here. The reason is very simple. As long as they are killed all the way, they can live to the last, perhaps only forced to choose the distant Jindan white dragonfly. Of course, on the other side, it is also destined to live no more than a few, up to 10 bad luck, maybe only one hand. Therefore the emergence of Jinyun is a great news for both parties. Otherwise, everyone is in a difficult situation to ride the tiger, only to smash the other's head to stop. At the same time, under the leadership of Jinyun, there is a rough agreement on the compensation for the war dead. Under the secret conversation between Jinyun and Sinew, Baiyun even took out a fairy money on the spot and gave it to the other 3 people to let them negotiate the distribution of the pension. There were 5 people in Baiyu and Zhanqing who died in a Hofu family. Jailing was also seriously injured. The Du of the Du was already on the verge of collapse, and the other imperial concubine was not much better. Zhanqing himself is not able to find the secret fan that has no refining for the life. The knows whether it is falling into the river, or is it secretly collected by a black heart. The little white prince dressed in a white cloak, the robes have been ruined, and there is no more temperament. However, the family lost a 7-faced Wufu who was a mainstay on the table. Zhanqing did not scream and scream at the slightest point of the day, but he always looked as usual and said nothing. He handed over all the powers to the day. This makes Bai Hao very happy. In the meantime, Sun Qing took the initiative and strangled the white-sounding words of the inferior. This place belongs to me. I am willing to help you to find the elders of Shuolongzong, and try not to let the Cloud City ventilate to other sections. However, if Yunshengsheng Shinjinza took the lead with other big monks, don't blame us for the monks who left the house. In this sentence I was so impressed by the white. In the past, the two sides had their own efforts to kill themselves. I am afraid that it is difficult for outsiders to see except the old real people. Therefore, after they have formally made a verbal covenant, Baiyu has the idea of establishing some personal friendship with Kaik House in the future. When Jinyun saw the two sides roughly negotiated, he was relieved. It's good to be good, but it's hard to be good. It's not only the realm of people who persuade them is so simple, but the clever grasp of people's hearts is the key. On the top of the mountain road, a tall old man emerged out of thin air. He glanced at the ruins of the Taoist ruins that piled up into the mountains. He shook his head and slowly walked over the steps. He smiled and said, "The children thought that this was all done? There is such a good under the sun. Do you get the money? People kill the most and people make it happen. Otherwise, see your children playing, what is the fun?" He rubbed his foot gently. When I walked over the steps, the two sides of the armistice overlooking the foot of the mountain, after a glance, they were instantly smashed by the sword. It's just the green river in the foot of the mountain. It's already a vista and it's smashing first, then it starts to boil. Xuanhuan was the first person to perceive a vision. The double sleeves were swaying, and a piece of jianghu was flying like water. Only in an instant, the river under the bridge will remain silent. Then, on both sides of the Bayou Arch Bridge, one of the tall, 5-footed Xingyi gods, one of the gods holding a silver pike, holding a shovel, each landing and then standing. At the same time, the white jade arch bridge was also clouded, eventually condensing a white goddess, her golden eyes, faceless expression, holding a picture shaft like a tabaw. She floated off the air and spread the scroll axis. The voice was like a scorpion and she spoke slowly. It was a well-informed old real person, Xuanhuan. After listening to the words of the white goddess, they felt ridiculous, but they had to be convinced. The general meaning is that this place is the ancient real person, the place where the testimony has soared, once ranked the 36th whole day and the 71 blessed land. It is a clean situation. They are guilty of sin and sin. Before the real person soared, he left a law to give them 3 and promised the later monks, relying on the number of treasures to determine the size of the opportunity, will eventually leave 5 people. Not only can leave all the celestial treasures in their hands, the secret of the fairy tales, for the first person, can obtain the rumored identity of the flying real person, and the rest are temporarily registered, and another direct teaching of the immortal. In the next 10 days only 5 people will survive in the end. Otherwise, everything will be void. All the opportunities will be said. They will also be reduced to the robbery. They will die on the spot. As a rumor and a registered disciple, if they are unable to clean up the teacher. This is not worthy of getting this edge. The scroll after the spread suddenly became as big as a waterfall, falling from the sky to the ground. There are 5 people hanging on the painting. It is the 5 people who have the most treasures and the strongest blessings. In addition to this water curtain, somewhere on the mountain, somewhere behind the mountain, as long as there is someone, there is a little water curtain hanging in the air. The words of the white goddess are not loud, but they are resounding in the heavens and the earth. Everyone is heard in the secret world. The young man who carried the white jade pen tube of xianxia, who was on the cloud, was stunned. He was on the list and his ranking was not low, ranking second. The woman monk on the side was mixed. The bottom of the person is a young son of a saber. Xuanhuan. This handsome white man with a pale face is stunned. In the 4th place, it is a scorpion man standing in front of the Gongguan stone monument, arms folded around his chest and eyes. The 3rd person is a tall and thin man carrying a robe like a robe. It is the sundial who claims to be the home of Raytheon. At this time, the tall and thin people have been sweating. 1st person. It is a black robe old man who is holding a bamboo hanging from the ground. Qin Pingon. Everyone saw the picture above. The guy still didn't want to land. He stretched out his hand and scratched his head. Then he looked at the landscape painting hovering in the air. He said with sincerity, "Look, make a mistake really wrong." Sword of Coming Chapter 934. The top of Bayuepiun Mountain. The ancient pine is towering and there is a man in Panasonic. Wearing a snow-white robe, stepping on a cloud shoe, tied a ribbon on his waist, and a gold ring around his ear. God, fairy, ghost, beautiful and picturesque. It is rumored that the 5 mountain monarchs of Aquarius Island have their own romantic affairs. Zhongyue Jinqing is the oldest and very ancient. Fan Junmao, the female mountain monarch of Nanyue, is the most heroic. The monarch of Dongyue Mountain is immortal, and the monarch of Xia Mountain is more chivalrous. Weibo of Bayue, among the 5 mountain monarchs on a continent, is recognized as the best in appearance, so he is the most energetic. According to a certain high-powered little herbation from Luapa Mountain, the only people in Bayu's realm who are looking forward to hosting a night banquet are those immortal children who have genealogical identities. At the banquet they just look at Wei Shanjun, who is drunk and blushing slightly, and they will be drunk even if they don't drink. Upon hearing this, Qin Pingon was about to fight against Wei Shanjun, so he asked the millet grains who was the gossip. The millet grains are said to be Bai Xian, but Bai Xian seems to have heard it from Jing Qing. Moreover, Jing Qing once slapped Bai Xian, and must attend the next night banquet to suppress Wei Boss limelight, lest our Wei Shanjun raises his tail and becomes too swollen. At this moment, Wei Bo opened a pair of pure golden eyes, sat up, smiled and said, "Where is Xiaoma?" "Nice to ask." Qin Pingyan angrily smiled and said, "I advise you to avoid Xiaomo's idea." Wei Bo smiled and said, "Do you know my mood now? Would the idea of persuading you to avoid hitting my few bamboos in the Luapa mountain? Wasn't the millet grains in those days instigated to come to me often to count bamboos?" Standing beside Qin Pingyan, Qing Tong looked at the majestic mountain monarch through the power fence gauze. He only said that the matter of going to a banquet next night today has almost become synonymous with Weibo in the Piyun mountain. It is said that the great mountain monarch of one continent was once the remnant of the Xinshui kingdom of the ancient Shu land boundary, and was relegated to the lord of the land. For some reason he was favored by the state teacher Cui Yun and was promoted to the mountain monarch of the Dai dynasty. The ups and downs of this Junjun encounter are breathtaking. Today Aquarius Island and Beiju Luzhou, both the north and the south, are well known. Faiyun Mountain and Luapa Mountain are good allies who wear a pair of trousers. But it is interesting to say that the young mountain owner in front of him set foot on Piyun Mountain for the first time in his life. When he was an apprentice as a young kiln worker, he waited until Weibo entered the mountain and served as the king of Beiyue Mountain, and Qin Pingyan also became the owner of Luapa Mountain. Only after that, most of Weibo went to Luapa Mountain as a guest, and Qin Pingyan never took the initiative to climb Piyun Mountain. It wasn't until Qin Pingyan traveled through the wild world last time and returned to his hometown that he took Xiaomo to climb the mountain together. The gift of meeting was so rich that Weibo would look forward to seeing him next time. Qin Pingyan smiled and said, "I won't talk nonsense with you." After Weibo learned of Qin Ping's intentions in this dream, he nodded without hesitation and agreed, but couldn't help but sigh. "I knew that you had snatched the abundant water transport from the Luluo River. I thought you would retreat. For a period of time, if you are lucky, if you stay for hundreds of years, maybe you will have the opportunity in the future to help you fight for the seat of the world's water law number 1. I don't even have merit." The 5 thunder rectification methods of Longhushan Tianshifu, the fire method of Huolong Jinren, and the native method of Iazhao Weishan, all can be said to have reached the highest level. It was the reminder from Weibo for the first time that Qin Pingyan really realized that his avenue was hydrophilic. Weibo said, "The 2 mountains of Beipingzu, the east and the west, may not be willing to nod. If you don't make up 1 continent and 5 sacred mountains, it will eventually be a dish of loose sand, and the effect of mountain incense will be greatly reduced." When dealing with the gods of the mountains and rivers, the difficulty lies in the fact that the great advantage is not the way. The hustle and bustle on the road below the mountain is a benefit, but the Shinto on the mountain is not. Just like Weibo was willing to agree to this matter, how could he just covet that merit? Once his desires were sour, it would be a problem to say that Weibo's mountain monarch was not golden. After all, there is a major premise here. The gods of all walks of life who ignite a stick of incense still need to sincerely recognize Qin Pingyan himself. Therefore, Qin Pingyan is the most crucial man who delivers incense with mountains and rivers. Qin Pingyan nodded and smiled. "I'm mentally prepared to eat closed doors, so I will come to you first to ask for a good sign of a good start." Weibo said, "Would you like me to say hello to those 2 bureaucrats?" Qin Pingyan shook his head and said, "Forget it, there is no big difference whether you have that letter or not." Weibo nodded. "It is true. The 5 sacred mountains are of the same rank in rank. No one can control who. Besides, Weibo has no strong friendship with the 2 sacred mountain monarchs, and there is no personal friendship between them. Correspondence is nothing more than an official business." Qin Pingyan asked, "Has Yi Qingzhu changed her mind? Did you visit your Shanjun mansion today and voluntarily request to withdraw the official document of her resignation from the Yuye River god of water?" Weibo shook her head and said, "You are wrong. On the contrary, Yi Qingzhu did rush to Piyun Mountain, but she didn't cry and quarrel with me and hang herself. She became more and more determined in her previous intentions. Relocating to another place, do not expect to be flat, can be degraded and appointed. She has photographed a few rivers. The only thing in common is that she is far away from the Luapa mountain. She is also angry with me, saying that if Beiyue is not allowed to do this, she am going to the capital to file a court case. My eyes are red when I speak and tears are shining, so pitiful." Qin Pingyan rubbed his chin. I was at the Yuye River Water Mansion and I had a good chat with the God of Water Empress and I was honest about it." Weibo smiled and said, "Even if she can believe your words, she believes more in her instincts." Qin Pingyan was silent. Weibo restrained his smile and said with a serious face, This means that you have to be careful of your Taoism in your future retreat. The image of the state holder and the person in the mirror is actually a small thing? Qin Pingan nodded and said, I will pay attention. This is a friend of mine. Wei Bo took out something from his sleeve and handed it to Qin Pingan. This is a gift to celebrate the next sect. Take it. Qin Pingan glanced at the gift. Can I have a face? It turned out that the two semi-celestial soldiers sent by Xiao Mo earlier, among them the Huang Yue that can suppress water transport, was used by our Lord Wei Dashan to be generous. At this moment, it was the sword box presented by Wu Yi, and it stayed on Xiao Mo's side, otherwise Qin Pingan would take it out and ask Wei Dashanjin how ashamed or ashamed. Wei Bo smiled and squinted and asked tentatively, forget it then? Qin Pingan waved his hand and looked at Wei Shanjun, who was insincere, and the pocket jade that disappeared in his sleeves. Using the mantra of Pei Chen's back then, it was a pain in his brain. Wei Bo looked at a monk wearing a green robes. Since he couldn't see the depth of Taoism, at least he had started in the fairyland and asked, what is this Taoist friend? Qin Pingan didn't bother to use his heartfelt words and said, the Taoist name is Qing Tong, the owner of the town's demon building in Tonggishao, is adjacent to the Taoist temple of Donghaiguan, and his true body is a phoenix tree. This time he dreamed of traveling to the 3 continents. The young fellow Taoist has helped a lot, so I don't know if you don't fight. Qing Tong sighed faintly and just told his own details. The hidden officer didn't talk about the morals of the rivers and lakes and the taboos of the landscape. This gentleman is very charming, but after closer inspection, Qing Tong feels that he is still inferior to the noble son Zhu Lian of the lotus flower-blessed land. Wei Bo bowed his head and bowed his hands in a salute. He was quite polite and said with a gentle voice, Wei Bo in Piyun Mountain is fortunate to have met the seniors of the same youth. Qing Tong took off the power fence above his head, and after saluting he smiled and said, Qing Tong has seen Jun Wei Shan. Wei Bo smiled and said, Senior Qing Tong, it is easy to get on and off the thief boat. From now on, we will be regarded as difficult brothers and hard brothers. Qing Tong smiles far-fetched. After holding his hands, someone climbed high and looked into the distance, busy admiring the scenery, and said with a smile, talking shallow and deep is a big taboo, Wei Shanjun stays a little longer. Qing Tong was a little envious of the friendship between the two, one and one immortal, complementing each other. It is no wonder that Piyun Mountain has been prospering over the years, and it has become the first of the 5 sacred mountains. Qin Pingan also talked about the rise of Xiaoyuan's deity in Baihu River and the relocation of Taidian Gaonyang to the temple to Yunzhou. In fact, the only difficulty is that Wuxi, located in the territory of Yunzhou in Huangting State, is more unusual. After all, there is a dragon palace site hidden. Such a mountainous and abundant land belongs to the rare fertility in the officialdom of Shanshui, and Wuxi, the Shimei River, one of the water sources, has never been a water in the history of Huangtingwa, not even the river Pohibo. To put it simply, when the Dragon Palace site is opened, water transport will naturally overflow, then leveling to the Shimei River, where water transport has skyrocketed, as the first river is a kind of promotion. In addition, as long as the river properly managed, it is easy to get an excellent test in the Shanshui evaluation of Lily Department and Shanjun Mansion. Wei Bo thought for a moment and said, "He'll run it. You just let Xuanhuan and Gaonyang wait for the news. The letter can be more blunt. They can now prepare for the raising and gilding of the golden statue in the temple." Qin Pingan asked, "I really don't need me to say hello to the Dali court? For the title of water god of Zemehi River, no accident, there must be a few candidates for the Dali court. Just like back then, in order to fight for the position of the Iron Talisman River god of water, the few Shangju kingdom's surnames in Dali did not fight secretly." Wei Bo shook his head and said, "The rank of the Thin Eyebrow River is not too high, and it is in the hinterland of Beiwei, not a few steps away from Piyun Mountain, so I can make a decision in one word." Qin Pingan said, "When you look back, remember to hit Gaonyang so that he won't forget about his sudden wealth, or bring the habits of Xiang Mansion to Yunzhou." Gaonyang stepped down from the Jixiang Temple on the Tiezhen River and moved to the Shimei River. After that, he attracted the incense of the jurisdiction and gathered the mountains and waters. Qin Pingan was not worried about getting along with the local city gods and Wenwu temples. Because this old river is very good at being a man, but Gaonyo is too familiar with the way of life for a water god. After all, it is far from enough. Wei Bo laughed and said, "I don't have a good gentleman in Shanjun Mansion." Afterwards we chatted for a few more words. When Wei Bo saw Qin Pingan, he was about to leave. He really left after in his trousers? Qing Tong feels complicated. After this trip, he has become more envious of the monarch Weibo and the great dukes like Yanghua and Chao Yong, each of whom is in charge of such a large landscape site. The key is the excitement. If there are a few able-bodied staff members who are skilled in general affairs, wouldn't they be able to be as leisurely as when they first met Weibo? Weibo called to Qin Pingan and smiled and said an anecdote. Your second guardian of the Luapa Mountain, Taoist Chief Xianwei, has not been idle for a while. At this moment he has secretly collected an anonymous disciple. Young casual cultivator, because this person admires the hermit, even if he knows that you will not collect any disciples in 30 years, he still rents a house in the small town. It seems that he intends to live for a long time. Chao Wu went to the mountain gate and wandered around. Seeing that he was eager to ask for the truth, Taoist Xianwei was eager to cherish his talents. Chao Qingqing, Yuan Lai, and Millet used to watch the door at the gate of the mountain one after another, but they were all part-time jobs. Qin Pingan heard loudly for a while. Previously, through the Shanshui mansion on the Piyun Mountain, I helped Luapashan to declare something to the outside world. Within 30 years, the Luapa Mountain was shaped like a mountain, and it would neither receive outsiders nor collect disciples. Regarding this matter, Qin Pingan just opened a very small opening to allow the members of the Jisifeng genealogy to collect direct disciples in private. Xianwei took advantage of it without thinking about it. Qin Pingan reluctantly said, "What is the prose character?" Weibo said, "Tough heart, average aptitude, Jiazi years or Dongfu realm, not Jianxiu. I checked his roots and feet, and his life is innocent. He is from the old Quanzhou of the Hoarfrost dynasty." Yixing Catechumen, once a small Taoist temple in Quanzhou, said that the Taoist temple was destroyed in the war. After the war, he repaired it as new with his own power, and then began to wander northward until he saw the seal. After the report, I wanted to come to Luapashan to settle down and practice, but he was not the kind of opportunist. I didn't want to use Luapashan as a shortcut to win fame, but simply felt that our young hermit in Aquarius was unique in the world. The hero of China wants to consult with Master Qin Shan, who is in the realm of swordsmanship, boxing, learning, and talisman. Qin Pingan remembered the scene of his first meeting with Xianwei in Dali capital. Even if Xianwei's other identity was aside, even an old river like himself was almost shocked by the other party's nonsense, and he was relieved for a while. There was grief, nodded and said, "I am not a Qing white man, and I will not be deceived by Xianwei Kang." Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "Listen to it, do you want me to acquiesce in this matter?" Weibo replied, "This Taoist priest seems to have Su Hui named Lin Feijing." The reason why Qin Pingan went through the house and did not enter was that the so-called cowardice of being close to hometown was just an excuse. The real reason was that he did not want Qing Tong to see the new janitor of Daohao Xianwei too early. It was just that after arriving at Piyun Mountain, Qin Pingan changed his mind instead, and did not stop Qing Tong from looking at Kilwopo Mountain, so he waited until Qing Tong saw the Taoist immortal way at the gate of the mountain. Qing Tong was more shocked than seeing the old master who imitated by Yujing. I saw that at the foot of the Luapa Mountain, there was a hairpin on the head of someone. At the same moment, Qing's face was pale and colorless, silently raised his hand, and reworn the power fence to cover his face. Is this the true foundation of Luapa Mountain? The first Taoist in the world. One of the top 10 in the ancient world. At the gate of Xuanhuan Mountain. The verdant color of the mountain is from top to bottom, pouring all the way to the foot of the mountain like flowing water. At this moment, Qing Tong's Taoist heart has gradually returned to calm, and he teased in his heart, "No wonder this mountain monarch has a blue character in his name." Qin Pingan reminded, "Jin Shan is not a joke, you will listen more and talk less later." In a hidden dojo near the mountain temple, I saw the Zhongyue Mountain Jun Jinqing who opened the door to welcome guests. Qin Pingan opened the door and said, "On the side of Shindu Mountain of Xiazong, two anonymous worshippers, Xiaopa the Immortal and the maid Meng Long, they are about to establish a country on the border of the Rin River in the middle of Tonggishao. His eldest daughter, Wu Yi, the founder of Xiang Mansion, will have an identity similar to that of a true protector of the country. Since I am a matchmaker in this matter, I will definitely not be the shopkeeper." Not surprisingly, the mountain prince once again faced the south and bowed his head. Jin Qing smiled and said, "I don't know anything." Qin Pingan nodded and said, "I didn't say anything." Originally, this knot was a dead knot between the Song family of Dai and Jin Qing in Zhongyue. Jin Qing, as the Daiyue mountain monarch, can be regarded as the largest former elder of the old Zhuang dynasty, not one of them. Therefore, Jin Qing will be very sincere with this stick of heart incense, because it is considered to be one, but his wish is with the fate. Emperor Dai really wanted to be held accountable afterwards. Jin Qing didn't care when he came and didn't take it seriously because it wasn't a cross-border move. After all, until today, Jin Qing has never come into contact with the Shao per immortal. Moreover, Jin Qing is not too worried about the sequelae. Anyway, it is the deal with Chen Pingan that you have the ability to find the hermit in trouble? However, I believe that with the disposition and magnanimity of the current emperor, he is not so careless. After all, after this, Jin Qing can concentrate on becoming the Zhongyue mountain monarch of the Dali dynasty. This is actually something that a national teacher of a country can do and can do. Jin Qing touched his sleeves and said with a smile, Qin Shanzhu is about to establish the next sect. Unfortunately, due to his identity, he is destined to not be able to come to congratulate him in person. The congratulatory gift has to be delayed for a few days. Because Jin Qing remembered it was in the other party's dream. Unexpectedly, Qin Pingan smiled. Jin Shanjun only needs to contemplate, and the gift that has been prepared for a long time can be changed from imaginary to real. Jin Qing thought about it a bit, and as expected, he drew out a tablet from his sleeve, which collected all of Zongyia's cliff-cut list books. There were more than 2,000 pieces, and there are many original monuments that have been lost. Jin Qing said heartily, "This is the only one, cherish it more." Generally speaking, the inscriptions on the inscriptions are mostly gifts given to each other by the gentlemen below the mountain. For the cultivators on the mountain, it looks like a gift of courtesy and affection. However, Qin Pingan solemnly took over the heavy rubbing. Because for Qin Pingan at the moment, this is a well-deserved charity. This is an urgent need for the practice of Chinese characters. Just like the 4 plaques commonly known as Crab Square in my hometown, after being copied several times by officials of the Ministry of Rites, they gradually lost their spirits, because the pure Daoqi contained in the words was quietly transferred to those rubbings. The plaque on Crab Fang seems to have the same text, but it is pale and weak in the eyes of the Taoist scholars. If the text is extracted from the books engraved by the market bookstore, and used to refine the text, it is the most inferior after all, and the quality of the refined text is low. The most excellent method of refining characters, of course, is based on those or records or seal inscriptions on special materials. The kind of Dharma is not lightly transmitted. Taoist golden rules, green chapters, and handwritten scripts of Confucian sages, Buddhist dragon elephants. The scriptures copied and annotated by the Taoist monks are just these words, which cannot be found, and once they are refined, they are a kind of damage to the Great Road and irreparable. It is equivalent to a source of water. Once Qin Pingan refines it, it will become fragments, which will produce a series of immeasurable movements and dispersal of qi, and even lead to future qi practitioners who practice this fairy formula. The words in the heart tend to be blurred and cannot really prove the truth, just like a common master. When he flips through a book, he occasionally finds that he does not recognize a certain word. The text of this rubbing is just somewhere in between. Before that, Qin Pingan was on the Killalong side and borrowed 300,000 words, with a group of old and new books on both sides of the Qiantang River. It really just won by quantity. There are many repetitions in the text of a poem, but this type of repetition can also be refined into one character. Just like the iron, the more tenacious, the greater the density, so the more the overlap, the more weight the text. Among them, the rhyme of Taoism is more important. As for the sword box sent by Wu Yi, which secretly carried the more than 60 words of the treasure urn, it belonged to the first situation of, can be met but cannot be sought. Qin Pingan said, "In this way Zhongyue Dao Qi will inevitably be compromised." Jin Qing sneered, "Then you pay me back? This mountain monarch just didn't say a word. If you get cheap here you still sell well." Qin Pingan promised, "Besides trading, I will repay Zhongyue when I vacate my hands in the future." Jin Qing said half-truth and half-truth. In the future? Why in the future? Master Hermit can serve as Zongyia's honorable guest officer today. As long as I nod my head, I immediately ask the Department of Etiquette to send out a beautifully worded landscape report. Qin Pingan shook his head and declined the matter. He really wanted to agree to be the guest of Zhongyue, but Wei Shanjun must not jump and scold others. From beginning to end, Jin Qing did not ask who the monk next to Qin Ping was. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, "That Huangshan Jianzong hasn't held the opening ceremony yet?" Jin Qing said, "Xinjiang Mountain has been scared by you. Wherever you dare to mention something next sect, I found myself a step down, changed the word zong to faction early, and named it Huangshanjian. Pai, looking at the posture, I completely give up, and I don't think there is any chance to create the next clan. As for the date of the celebration, it was set in the spring of next year at the beginning. Pick a lucky day." According to the current situation, it will be the end of next year at the earliest. Not to mention Qin Pingan and Lu Xianying, who were jointly questioning the sword. Only the sword fairy Miyu and the female grandmaster Pei Qian, who were both found out in their identities, were two mountains that could not be crossed by the monks of Mount Xingyang. At the foot of Xingyang Mountain, which was temporarily named Huangshan Sword Sect by Emperor Bamboo, Jianxiu Yuan Bai, one of the double Bai of the old Zhuang dynasty, finally did not break away from Xingyang Mountain's genealogy and did not serve as Zhongyue Guest Qing. She just returned to her homeland and served as the first head of the Huangzhou Sword Sect, and the King Yufeng female cultivator Ni Yuerong, who has jumped several levels in a row, was promoted directly from the treasurer of Gyunla to the downhill of Xingyang Mountain. God of Wealth. Qin Pingan said, "I'm still self-righteous. Soke, when good things come, he'll be a little bit more happy." At the beginning, Xingyang Mountain felt that the next sect would be something in the bag, and became the first sect in the history of Aquarius to have the next sect, with a great momentum of "let me in others." Now I feel that the next incident is destined to be a literal mirror image, but I don't know that the Dei court has arranged for the Huangshan Sword Sect. Even if Xingyang Mountain and the Mountain Lord Bamboo Emperor do nothing, they are still destined to be promoted. It is the first martial art of Zhongzi. Jin Qing smiled and said, "Is this the road to heaven?" Nowadays, the entire Aquarius Mountain and Shanshui officialdom are particularly fond of watching the jokes of Xingyang Mountain. And the unintentional words of Shanjun Zhongyue are actually very chewy on Qing Tong's side, and the aftertaste is endless. Qin Pingan smiled and did not comment, but just asked, "After becoming the sword sect of Huangshan Mountain, following the old rules of the Confucian Temple, there must be a monk from the upper 5 realms as the suzerain, so Yuan Bai can't be the suzerain. What will happen then? Is to return again? Xingyang Mountain, or come to Jin Shanjun to be a guest Qing?" Jin Qing said, "It still depends on Yuan Bai's own intentions. Going to Xingyang Mountain means that you are old-aged. From time to time, you have to be negotiated by the Patriarch Hall. With Yuan Bai's temper, he has already repented once, so he is unlikely to come to my mountain. Since the monarch's palace has practiced, most of them will choose to stay in the next sect." Qin Pingan said sincerely in his eyes, "Then bother Jin Shanjun and Yuan Bai say hello. Tongyi's his first kendo sect, Xiandushan Qingping Jianzong, look forward to it, waiting for your ride." Jin Qing laughed loudly and said, "Dare you dig the foot of the wall?" Qin Pingan said with a serious face, "I implore Mr. Shan to tell this matter to Yuan Bai, and it is best to help persuade one or two." Jin Qing was a little surprised. "Do you value Yuan Bai so much?" Yuan Bai had reached the end of the road to the dead end, and in this life he had no hope of entering the 5 realms, and completely missed the word sword immortal, and it was almost a foregone conclusion. Speaking of ordinary sects, even the Middle-earth divine continent, who was born in large numbers that day, is naturally willing to pay tribute to a Yuan-ing realm sword repairman who has stopped moving. But for Qin Pingan, who has the title of hidden officer, what sword repairman hasn't seen in the Great Wall of Sword Qi? Qin Pingan said solemnly, "There are high and low levels of swordsmanship, but the pure 2 characters do not distinguish between high and low." Jin Qing said, "When something is really done, I can talk about it and let Yuan Bai decide where to practice." Before Qin Pingan left the Jin Qing dojo, he gave out a green bamboo folding fan and said with a smile, "It's not a respect to show your heart." Jin Qing took the folding fan and knew it was a veritable disrespectful. He smiled and said kindly, "If the hospitality is poor, please bear with me." When Qin Pingan and the entourage left Beiyue, Jin Qing opened the folding fan, and there was an inscription on the fan. "Thousands of mountains embrace the mountains, Bai Shui Huiting, the country gate Hao Chui, the giant spirit guards the mountain, the sword lies in the frost fight, 10,000 years of brewing this majestic Quidditch. The master of learning, his ties, national spirit, chivalrous, righteous and courageous, using the fortunes of seclusion, the sun and the moon and the heart of the veterans." With a smile on Jin Qing's face, he closed the folding fan, firmly grasped it in the palm of his hand, looking at the mountains and rivers and whispered softly, "Those who have the Tao will help." After that, Qin Pingan took Qing Tong to Dongyue and Xia. The 2 mountain monarchs were quite polite, opening the door to welcome guests, and even held a banquet in honor of Qin Pingan. It's just that after hearing about the young hidden official's intention, the final result is 2 terms, 1 meaning. A relative euphemism that Dongyue Shanjun said with a smile that this matter was against his original intention, and could only let Chen Yingguan go away for nothing. And Mr. Xia Shan said that Tongyi's Hao, whose heart is sparsely populated, is simply a pool of mud that can't be supported. Who has ever seen Lord Qin who would put a stick of incense in the mud? Qing Tong murmured, the mountain monarch of Aquarius one continent. Even so, I didn't let you eat closed doors when I died. I entered the mountain gate anyway. Please have a cup of tea. But the 5 mountains in the Middle Earth, the 5 mountain monarchs, it will only be bigger. What should I do? Compared with the last time Qing Tong was led by the nose, Qin Pingan and Qing Tong made it clear about where to see who was going to meet in the mountains this time. Wearing a blue shirt is like dancing in the void, surrounded by a dreamlike glazed glaze, is a wonderful view that can only be found when wading in the long river of time. Qin Pingan calmly said, the boat goes to Kwoto Road to look for the mountains and take a step to see what else can be done. Qing Tong asked, don't you feel aggrieved at all? Qin Pingan couldn't help being amused by this question, and gently rubbed his face with both hands. Qing Tong, you have been on the top of the mountain for too long, except for the thought of Jianxia, which will make you feel useless. If you are willing, I can help to say hello to the Confucian temple and allow you to travel across continents. I don't have the skills, but let you leave the town's demon building and travel anywhere on the continent. I'm still a little sure. If I had this idea, I wouldn't tell the Confucian temple myself. I have a friend who said that people should not be led away by face. Furthermore, don't think that the most sacred master has once been in the demon tower of the guest town. You can really do it. The Shanshui officialdom is also a public practice. There are many rules in different ways. The county official is not as good as the current one. It is the same. You can't fake the imperial edict and talk nonsense with the Confucian temple. Say that the holy master agreed to this matter? Then tell yourselves. If you don't talk about the 3 masters and deputy heads of the Zhongtu Confucian temple, Shuegong Jijio, and Sai, you must be unfamiliar with them and you have never seen them before. Then just talk about Tonggishao Dafu and Tianmu. There are 3 local academies in Wuxi, plus the sages who sit in the sky. Which one do you know? So let alone make an exception for you and say good things. It is estimated that there are some ambiguities that are feasible or not. It will only be a failure. I took the initiative to speak just now. You are just a trivial matter of nodding your head along the way, but if you bypass me and be rejected by the Confucian temple, wouldn't you lose the face? Humans, whether you practice on the mountain or discuss life under the mountain, you just want to go out and have face everywhere, but you can't just live for face. Don't take care of the firewood, rice, oil, salt, sauce, vinegar and tea at hand. Isn't this the reason why you can go down the mountain easily? Qing Tong was speechless. Qin Pingan smiled and said, at this moment, avoid the cold. You can keep up with the phrase, something makes sense again. Qing Tong said, do you like reasoning so much? Qin Pingan smiled and said, that's a friend you haven't met me with. By the way, he will attend the next ceremony, and he should be in Shindu Mountain now. When I ask you to come to your house as a guest, you will treat it as a my face. Qing Tong asked, who? God knows who you will let as a guest. Qin Pingan said, it's Lu Jinglong, the sect master of Taihui Sword Sect, a man who is good at reasoning and likes to drink. He said in advance that my friend has an invincible amount of alcohol. Is there a lot of immortal wine stored in the town's demon building? There are few sword repairmen in the world who don't drink, Qing Tong said. I heard of this person. It seems that he is not high in realm now. Is he just a sword repairer in the Jade Pure realm, right? Qin Pingan tut. Isn't the realm high? If Lu Jinglong is a local swordsman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi, it is estimated that the eldest sword fairy will teach swordsmanship himself. Just talking about Lu Jinglong's natal flying sword, it will definitely be rated as the top of the Summer Palace, because the highest rank is only the top one. I have to admit that it has been a long time to get along with Qing Tong, the great mountain monk, and it seems to be quite easy. Let's look at the other ones. Guandao Guanold Guanzhu by Di Qingjing Zhong, Sui Chugong Wu Shuangjiang. If they had the identity of a 14th level cultivator, then even the ascending level swordsman Pei Min, and the sudden rain asking about the sword, the pressure that Pei Min brought to Qin Pingan was incomparable. Regarding Lu Jinglong's visit, Qing Tong neither refused nor agreed, but just thinking of the janitor at the foot of the mountain, Qing Tong still couldn't hold back it, and his uncontrollable voice trembled slightly and asked a weird question. Is he really him? Qin Pingan smiled and said, yes. Qing Tong gritted his teeth and snorted coldly, not daring to ask questions. Jianxio speaking and doing things, is really cheaper than the other. Qin Pingan smiled and said, why do you curse? Qing Tong's face was gloomy. You can already hear my heart? Qin Pingan smiled and said, guess again. Qing Tong was angrily, it's enough. Qin Pingan smiled and fell silent for a moment before asking for no reason, where did all the words we spoke, you said? probably not expecting any answers from Qing Tong. Qin Pingan asked and replied, "Could it be like a comparison of two mirrors?" Nanua. At the time when the drizzle was hazy, the rain was continuous and the mountain roads were muddy and difficult to navigate. The female mountain monarch Fan Junmao looked around, and was actually in the pavilion where she was last time. It is said that thinking of the day leads to dreams of the night. What's the matter? Fan Junmao folded his hands and surrounded the blue shirt. He smiled and said, "It's good for you to dream of others by the gods of mountains and rivers. Come on, see me, what do you mean by sneaky things?" Fan Junmao glanced at Qing Tong slantingly. "This man? Is it unnecessary for her to appear here?" Fan Junmao pretended to say suddenly, "Understood, it's just that Mr. Hidden tastes a bit heavy." Qin Pingan was expressionless. "Done?" Fan Junmao restrained his joking expression, stopped, sat on the bench and asked, "The vision of the world that originated in by Yujing earlier is related to you, right?" Qin Pingan nodded without denying. Fan Junmao was amazed, saying that the country is easy to change and the temperament is difficult to change. This guy is really a good wealth boy. The only difference is the identity. The taxi should treat each other with admiration for 3 days. The younger brother Fan Air is always foolish. Fan Junmao leaned against the railing, leaned his legs and placed his hands horizontally on the railing. Originally he was tired and lazy. After hearing Qin Pingan's business experience, Fan Junmao suddenly looked vigorous. He was fair in business and made a small profit. Whoops, never thought that today is the 30th of the new year, and a good year can be had. As for the monk Meili in Bai who dared not see anyone, Fan Junmao didn't need to look straight, because she could see through the humble and inferior origin of the other party at once. After all, Fan Junmao had a more concealed origin in addition to the identity of the mountain monarch on the table. What if he is an ascended cultivator? It's just a little bigger ant. Just like Najigue, how can it be a real dragon? In the ancient years 10,000 years ago, it was still a long reptile. The supreme person back then found Fan Junmao, who had already opened his mind and remembered his former identity. Just because Fan Junmao said something wrong, the other party almost cut her to death with a sword, but Fan Junmao was still happy. You must know that Fan Junmao was in the ancient heavenly court, and in fact the status was not low, and it was regarded as the existence of the second highest position. Qing Tong secretly swallowed because she vaguely recognized the person's roots and feet. It was not Qing Tong's unique vision, but after Fan Junmao became a female mountain king, she intentionally or unconsciously restored part of her former true face, which happened to be Qing Tong once. I have seen her once from afar and I have a deep memory. It may also be a human monk in the ascending realm, who is younger than Qing Tong, and even has a lower cultivation base and lower killing power. They look at the remnants of the gods like Fan Junmao. It will be a completely different perspective. Qin Pingan looked at Fan Junmao and smiled. This is the look in his eyes 10,000 years ago, and it will still be the same after 10,000 years. Then this life has worked so hard to temper the golden body of the gods. What is the picture? Qing Tong was on Qin Pingan's side. He was used to playing dumb riddles and destructive speech. For a while he was moved a little bit and he was a little uncomfortable. Fan Junmao stared at this unassuming young sword repairman. Her eyes were cold and her face was uncertain. After a while she suddenly smiled and nodded frequently and said, "The official of the hidden official, whoever is the official has the final say." Fan Junmao made a complete cut from the previous moment and asked with a smile, "Do you want me to call Fan Air over?" Qin Pingan seemed to be in the same situation, shaking his head and smiling. "No, I will definitely find him for a drink when I return home from Tongyi's house." Fan Junmao looked playfully, "Drinking flower wine?" Qin Pingan nodded and said, "Two big gents just drinking flower wine, what can be the problem? Amidst the yin flowers I am sitting in distress, isn't it more determined?" Fan Junmao obviously didn't believe it and sneered, "Really? Leave me here and get a fat man with a swollen face?" As a mountain monarch I have heard many deeds of the second treasurer of the Great Wall of Jianghu. Qin Pingan said, "What's false about this? The sword repairman of the Great Wall of Sword Qi who doesn't know I, Qin Pingan, drink when I want to drink and I will return whenever I want to return to Ningfu." Ningyao stopped once? Ever said half a sentence? Absolutely nothing. You outsiders know a shit. In fact, Qin Pingan had already honestly reported with Ningyao about the meal that he had missed for so many years. Said that he had passed by Old Dragon City for the first time, and met with that Fan Air. In addition he was young and ignorant. At that time he couldn't hold back the stunner of Fan Air, and promised him to drink flower wine. Of course, the so-called flower wine at most is that there are women playing the piano from the side. Fan Junmao asked casually, "Have you been to the eastern and western mountains?" Needless to say, Weibo and Beiyue is a family with Chen Pingan. In addition, the Fengyuan ferry from the Xuanmi dynasty of Luopishan will dock at the Zhongyue ferry, which means that Chen Pingan and Jin Qing also hooked up. Chen Pingan nodded and said, "None." Fan Junmao gloated and said, "Shan Lord Qin is so guilty that he has the status of a hermit who can frighten people. Otherwise, with the temper of a certain mountain monarch, he must make an order on the spot." Chen Pingan smiled and said, "You gave me the status of a hidden official?" Fan Junmao laughed loudly, raised his hand, and a jug appeared in his hand and shook it gently. When the two sides first saw each other, they were taking the Long Dao route under the ground. The two ferry boats staggered past, and they were once played by Fan Junmao. To be precise, both sides thought that each other was a fool at the time. Chen Pingan said, "I won't drink the wine anymore, I'm going on my way soon." Fan Junmao didn't mean to keep guests but said, "Don't give up so many merits. This move is tantamount to a little profanity." Chen Pingan shook his head and said, "Take it from the heavens and the earth and return it to the heavens and the earth. You think it's a profanity, I think it's hadao." It's just this vocabulary that Chen Pingan said when he reached his lips and he swallowed it back. The meaning was too big and it was a bit unclear. Oh, if the old cook Cui Dongshan, Pei Qian and Jia Xing were around, I guess they would have followed the flattery. When Chen Pingan left, Fan Junmao was still sitting in the pavilion. She showed a look of sadness, raised her head and took a sip of wine, then turned her head and looked out of the mountain. The mountains and rivers have no fixed master, and they have changed the world. The mountains and rivers are beautiful without the old colors. Drinking 101,000 kinds of xianxia fermented wine is full of the bitter taste of coptis. Fan Junmao threw the empty wine jug out of the pavilion and plunged into the sea of clouds. Eventually, it slammed on the ground and there was no sound after a sound. Can it really be hard to come by? God knows. God knows? During the sleepwalking in the long river of time, Qing Tong asked, "Next is to go to Zhongtu Sui Mountain? I have long heard that the request for a visa over there is very good, and the plain noodles are delicious and Qing Tong is looking forward to it." Chen Pingan rarely hesitated. He temporarily changed his mind and muttered to himself, "Old rules, when you arrive at the Middle-earth Shenzhou, you must have a good start. Just like in the Qingfufang Mr. Hong's house, there is a bonsai on the table that looks like a small dojo. The little guys don't say, 'Gongshi get fortune,' and I don't think I have crossed the threshold." Zhongtu Shenzhou, the territory of the Daong dynasty. The two sides showed up at a mountain gate. Qing Tong looked up at the plaque and said in doubt, "Jiangxian Pavilion? Pavilion owner Yunyi is not a mountain god." Qing Tong only heard that during the discussion at the Confucian temple, Chen Pingan had a big fight with this immortal on Yuanyang's side, and he was about to be born and died. Could it also be the kind of no-acquaintance relationship? Chen Pingan explained, Wei Zi, the Taoist companion of Yun Bei, is also an immortal. It is mainly this female cultivator who owns the broken secret realm equivalent to most of the blessed land. As long as he respects the incense and is sincere, it can be counted as a mountain incense. That's why Chen Pingan only went to his lotus root blessed land before. In fact, the Dragon Palace Xiadongshan in Luzhou, North Ju, can also ignite a stick of water. It's a pity that Li Yuan and Shen Lin, the two great dukes, are no longer in the cave. Inside. As for the Qingtan blessed land of Aquarius God sect, Chen Pingan had no incense relationship with sacred sect in Tianjun Qizhen except for knowing Han Zhoujin, who was born in the blessed land. As for the cloud cave blessed land of Yuguazang Jiang from Tongyi's Hao, Chief Zhou is not there, so there is no need to go. Chen Pingan instantly dissipated his spiritual consciousness, and quickly shrank the mountains and rivers one step at a time, and went straight to a small xie near the water. This is the forbidden place of Jiangxian Hall. Only Yunbei and Wei Zi, a couple of gods and family members, can come here to visit and relax. The immortal Yunya happened to be dealing with the sect affairs in the water pavilion at the moment. He suddenly raised his head and looked at the two uninvited guests by the water. After seeing the face of one of them, he quickly moved his fingers together and gently pushed aside a heavy treasure. He just picked up the whisk on the table, took it with him, got up immediately and walked out of the water pavilion quickly. Qing Tong saw the immortal of the Jiuzhen Immortal Hall, with a face like a crowned jade, white clothes surpassing snow, holding a snow-white whisk in his hand. Yunba's appearance and tolerance are all very good, but it seems to be a bit inferior to Shanjun Weibo. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "It's been a long time since I saw you." The Taoist friend Yunya still has the same demeanor. Yun Yi forcefully resisted the horror in his heart and bowed, but he remained silent and didn't know how to address the other party. As for how to be dragged into this place, immortal Yunya is both strange and not strange. It is strange why the other party is willing to take the initiative to find himself. It is not surprising how the other party did this. Qin Pingan exclaimed, "Be careful and cautious, better than casual cultivators." Lu Jimao once said that in terms of mental means, those immortal genealogists in the eyes of Xianxia are young children who do nothing more. But there are a handful of immortal genealogists who talk about the degree of cruelty and the concealment of harmful methods. Xianxia Xiao knows those inside stories, and I am afraid we will be ashamed. Yun Yao quickly put away the whisk that has always been used to save his life. His face was ashamed and he whispered, "Mr. Zheng laughed. Since Mr. Zheng is willing to bring that unpredictable monk with him, it must be a confidant. Qingtong has removed the power fence, a Middle-earth sect that he knows, at best, is to fairyland, even if it is not in Qin Pingan's dream. Visiting the Jianghu Xuanhuan by himself is not a leisurely garden. Take a walk?" After hearing the name Mr. Zheng, Qingtong was a little confused. Could it be that Qin Pingan traveled to the Central Earth continent, and then used a pseudonym surnamed Zheng? Qin Pingan said, "Whether Wei Zi is in the mountains, I want to take a trip to the secret realm, and I need you to light a stick of incense each." The immortal Wei Zi is proficient in ghosts, and her way of proving is exactly the place where the evil spirits are strong. Yun Yao quickly called her over to Shuixi, Taoist companion Wei Zi, looking at the face of the 28th girl. Qin Pingan then roughly said the reason for this trip, and both Yunya and the Taoist couple did not hesitate, and they readily agreed. As for those two merits, Yun Yi was actually unwilling to accept, but he dared not refuse. Wei Zi then opened the door of the secret realm and led the city lord of the Baidi city into that secret dojo together with a female sister who was most likely to be an ascendant realm. In the land of thousands of miles, the evil spirits are rising, the smoke is billowing, and there are tens of thousands of lonely ghosts floating around, but there is no sense of filth, and there are even several cities in which ghosts and ghosts live, and they are extremely prosperous. It is a kind of Tongxian handwriting that seems to recreate Yangjian. Qin Pingan and his party are now standing on a high platform that looks like the center of the sky and the earth. Qingtong's realm is enough. Staring at the seemingly filthy but clear-spirited heaven and earth, he said to Qin Pingan with his heartfelt voice, "As long as these immortal and humane couples are not arrested here, they are gathered around and lost their sacrifices. The ghosts of are a merit in themselves. And seeing that those ghosts can maintain a little real spirit, they seem to have a going place, so the latter is more likely. It is very likely that this is a link between the sun and the underworld. The bridge crossing the river? Yes, this female cultivator should be the kind of legendary mountain barman. I really underestimated the Jiozhen Immortal Pavilion, this Middle-earth god continent. There are indeed many strange people and strangers." Seeing that Mr. Zheng did not speak, Yunya and Wei Zi looked at each other. Wei Zi also joked before, if the other party is a guest at the Jiozhen Immortal Hall, how will the husband behave himself? Now Yun Yao wants to say something with a smile. Would you still doubt the identity of the other party? The prohibition on the landscape of the Nine Realms Immortal Pavilion is not something that a random ascendant can come and go freely. Mr. Zheng's identity is naturally true and there is no doubt about it. Besides, just to mention that Mr. Zheng's entourage, the condensed Dao Qi, is not more astonishing than the old soaring of Nan Guangzhou and his ilk? Wei Zi said with a coquettish voice, "It's been a long time since the cooking is broken, and the fish is raw in the cauldron. This kind of clumsy trick will only laugh generously in the eyes of the Taoist." Qin Pingan shook his head. "You are interested." Yunya whispered softly, "It's a pity that this secret realm is firmly connected to the ancestral mountain of our Jiozhen Immortal Hall and cannot be moved. If this is not the case, otherwise Yunya really plans to relocate this place to Tonggishao or Fuyezhou." Qin Pingan was silent. Because at this moment Qin Pingan even has a conjecture that he feels very horrible. Only a handful of mountain monks would guess that Jing Juzhong had actually been among the 14th realms. Then only a handful of monks knew that Jing Juzhong had not only entered the 14th realm, but also had one person in two 14th realms. Then is there a possibility that Jing Juzhong still has a third clone who has been practicing quietly in that dark place for many years? Qin Pingan calmed his mind and asked casually, "Is the sect that Nan Guangzhou stayed in, the Jiozhen Immortal Hall, almost digested?" Yun Yao bowed his head and clasped his fists to thank him. 7 or 8, it's already something in the belly. Nan Guangguang was decapitated by the criminal officer Haosu, and this Mr. Zheng in front of him was the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi. Isn't it simple and easy? If it weren't clear that Jing Juzhong wouldn't mind this misunderstanding of just wrong, Qin Pingan would have slapped Yun Ye's head with a slap. Would he have a degree of wonder? With a strange mood, Qin Pingan left the Jiangxian hall with Qing Tong. Inside the water pavilion, Wei Zi asked in his heart, "What do you think Mr. Zheng did this way?" Yun Yi fell to the dust and smiled and said, "Why should we be mediocre and count the hearts of the heavens? Just watch from the sidelines and wait and see. Mr. Zheng's conspiracy must be beyond imagination." Wei Zi covered his mouth and smiled. The husband is self-conscious, and never thought that there would be a day when he would willingly call himself a mediocre. On the long journey in the Qingtongsan Lake, there are turbulent waves. Finally came to the aftertaste. Who could be that Yunya and Wei Zi, a pair of immortals, who are like gods from the bottom of their hearts and whose surname is Zheng? Putting on me lays Qing Tong again, he raised me lay again, turned to look at Qin Pingan with a timid expression, cautiously said, "Before many offenses I hope Zheng. Mr. Qin has a lot, don't worry about it." Since he is afraid of the embroidered tiger Cui Yang, how can Qing Tong not be afraid of the other chess player in the 10th game of Kaiyun, the lord of Beta Shengzheng? Qin Pingan said helplessly, "Do you and Yunya use the same brain?" Qing Tong felt that he was not stupid and he wondered if it was so. Who on earth is Qin Pingan, and his true identity became more and more confused. Be careful to sail the ship for 10,000 years. I would rather believe it if you have it than if you don't believe it, and treat it as that person. Before leaving Tongyi's Hao, the master of Bixiao Cave of Guandao Temple had a farewell to Qing Tong. Lao Guanju also had a comment on the pros and cons of the world's heroes such as Fu Luyuxian, the pure Yang Taoist Lu Yen. Heavenly Master Zhao Tianlai Ai Aizhou God of Wealth Lu Jubao, and the real person of the Fire Dragon on Difeng, should have been a 14th level but missed Wei Shi. Swordsman Pei Min Taoist Liang Shuang. As for Huayin and his ilk, they don't seem to be worthy of being brought to the table by the old master. Among them, of course, there is the awe-inspiring demon Dao giant, Beta Shengzheng in the middle. You don't need to be too jealous of the people Zheng in the center, the whole world at most one hand. In addition to the word too much, the key is that the old view master also added 2 words, now. If it were not for this small chat with the old Guanju, Qing Tong would really not be so afraid of a great monk from the Middle-earth divine continent. The big deal is that the water in the well does not invade the river. Besides, both sides are ascending to consummation, and Qing Tong is happy to be quiet, and only needs to stay in the town demon building, and will not take the initiative to provoke Baidi City. In the end, the old master gave a conclusion. In the future, it will be as long as 200 or 300 years and as long as 1,000 years. When the 5 worlds are added together, the mountain monks with at most hands can try to break their wrists with Zheng Juzhong. If there is a brand new one of the world's top 10, there must be a place for Zheng in the middle. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Since you are so in awe of Qingzhu Zheng, do you want to understand a truth? A person who cultivates the Tao needs to cultivate his strength and his mind." Qing Tong nodded vigorously and said, "The most reasonable." Qin Pingan couldn't laugh or cry, really felt a bit useless. I have a hard questioning and I have to add Xiaomo's questioning sword. It turns out that it is not as effective as a Mr. Zheng. On the way to Sui Mountain in Zhongtu, Qing Tong has been carefully looking at the green shirts around him from the corner of his eye. Finally found that the other party had a smiling face, as if thinking of a happy thing with gentle eyes. At the age of 14, after leaving his hometown for the first time, Qin Pingan traveled a long way, drank many kinds of drinks and saw many people and things, but every year he walked he would have to go more. Haven't eaten mooncakes in a year. How many times have you eaten? Qin Pingan is actually not very sure because there are vague memories. It seems that there were only 2 times before the 5th age. Even if the Luapa mountain became more and more lively and there were more and more people later, Zhu Lian managed to keep things dripping, and Xuanhuan was careful, but this matter was forgotten. Qin Pingan made up his mind that this year's Mid-Autumn Festival in Luapa Mountain must enjoy the moon and eat moon cakes. The Mid-Autumn Festival has a bright moon, rich and poor, which is very comforting. Sword of Coming Chapter 935. Suishan in the Soil. On the top of the mountain, a golden armored man with a sword in both hands slowly opened his eyes. The of the mountain monarch, his real name travels around, and the name of the god. Hauran Jojo mountains and rivers in the world's first mountain god. Zhou Yu looked at the Qingshan swordsman who was standing thousands of miles away. Not far or near, this person happened to be on the border of Beiyue with a rebel by his side. Zhou Yu frowned slightly, thinking together, the dream shattered, and there was a faint sound of cracks in porcelain between the heaven and the earth. Zhou Yu looked at the green shirt guest in the distance and asked, "How did you do this?" After all, forcibly dragging a Middle-earth Daiwa mountain monarch into a certain dream state, even the peak cultivator of the ascending state could not do it. What's more, it is not a fun thing to do this kind of activity when it is full. Of course, except for the real fire dragon in Luzhou, Beiju, and did it twice. The first time was the proof of the real fire dragon from the fairyland to the ascendant realm. He once sleepwalked the Wayuhudu. The second time was that the old was completely boring, using the rhetoric of the Huolong real person, "It is the poor way and the poor, you can't afford an intercontinental ferry." The young hidden official looked sincerely and said, "If you are sincere, then you will have the same strength?" The burly golden armored man took a deep breath, chuckled, raised one palm and patted the hilt with his palm. His mother is very familiar. It couldn't be more familiar because it sounds like an old scholar. Zhou Yu and Qin Pingan have actually met many times. The last time I participated in the Confucian temple discussion, the two sides did not have a word. The young hidden official seemed to have a guilty conscience, and he didn't dare to get close to this great Suishan god. After all, for the first time being a guest at Suishan, Qin Pingan was still a silly straw-shoe boy. He once broke through the prohibition on Suishan's landscape with a sword and committed a disrespectful act. Because of this incident, a lot of suspicions from the monks at the top of the Middle-earth mountain were provoked. After that, the ancestral temple received a lot of letters inquiring about the matter, and traveling around was too lazy to reply. Is it true that the invincible person in the Qingming world left by Yujing and traveled far to Suishan with the sword? Or those old sword immortals from the Great Wall of Sword Qi, and Suishan turned their old accounts? Speaking of Howren's native swordsmanship, who would dare to act so presumptuously and want to go to Gongdalan to eat prison and read sage books? In addition, there was one time, but the two sides did not meet, because it was Qin Pingan who was forced to come here to meet with the Holy Master. At that time, it was not appropriate to show up when traveling around so as not to reveal the secret. Qin Pingan Zui apologized, "I was young and ignorant and acted impulsively, often offensive." Zhou Yu shook his head and said, "It's just an unintentional act, you don't need to care too much. Suishan is banned by the sword. There is no prejudice against the straw-shoed boy when he travels around. The old scholar who has to settle accounts must be counted on the head of the matchmaking. It's just that the old scholar was cheeky back then, and abducted an ancient sword pill named Xiafengdu from Suishan. The roots and feet of this thing are a bit similar to the Naiwan sword embryo presented by Wu Yi in Xiang Mansion. It is a treasure made by a real man in the 5 sacred areas of the Middle Earth. A person of good fate can open the door to the ruins of the real cave mansion with a token in hand. As for how much blessing he can get afterwards, it is uncertain whether the Qi practitioner enters the treasure mountain and returns without time, or returns with a full load. It is a pity that Qin Pingan was unable to find the right way to practice in the future. Before the opportunity came, he was still not allowed to enter. He just reluctantly made him a life thing, but he still failed to become a genuine swordsman. Moreover, the young alley boy who was born in Lizhu Cave Heaven was pure-hearted and could not hear a hint from the old scholar, so he has not been able to take this thing to Suishan for a tour. If Qin Pingan could take a trip to the Middle-earth Shenzhou and Suishan before visiting the Great Wall of Sword Qi for the second time, he would cultivate the immortal method to gain the fate of Taoism, and finally succeed in his sword practice. A lot of ups and downs. Regarding this matter, Lao Xiaocai and Zhou Yu had a rehearsal in their early years. Lao Xiaocai regretted his intestines and was worried. He only said that he had made a mistake and blamed me. It turned out that Qin Pingan had never drunk wine in those days. He only heard Master Wenxing say that Suishan's fruit stuffed with flowers is a must-see in the world, and where does a teenager take it seriously, and because of his thin-skinned skin, he only felt that he had been slashed inexplicably with a sword. People's shaman's landscape formation still have the face to beg for drinks? But when I said that the old scholar changed his words, the great god Suishan is the most generous. He is a heroic and arrogant man. There are immortals and money everywhere in the mountains. People with average luck can pick up some, you don't. The mountain is not happy yet. Do you think Qin Pingan would come to Suishan and find his way into the mountain to visit the immortals? Only 10 or 20 hours a day, maybe 11 hours, you can see the figure of a young man walking with his head down. Traveling around cannot go to see the annoyed look of old Xiaocai scratching his cheeks and beating his chest, but the ears can't escape the noise of the old Xiaocai's mother-in-law. It is really annoying, so I have to say, take some detours and suffer more. Isn't it a good thing? As a result, traveling around and not talking is okay. Upon hearing this, the old scholar seemed to have finally found a reason and started swearing, "Damn. He is taller, standing taller, older and more capable, so he likes to stand and talk without back pain, right? Endure hardship? How do you want that child to endure hardship?" Zhou Yu said disapprovingly, "I was born in a poor alley, lost my parents when I was young, unable to study, isolated and helpless, so I had to wander around and work hard for a living. To be honest, this hardship is nothing. It's not difficult for Qin Pingan to find hundreds or thousands of people his age who have experienced similar situations." The old scholar sighed, probably reluctant to say more about it, and ended the topic with a sentence of, "Numbness, you know what a fart. Pleasure and suffering is just the way to live in the world. Without self-knowledge of suffering, is the way of standing up. The Xuanhuan mountain in the middle soil is towering and unparalleled, and all things are developed, which is extremely high in the sky. The 5 sacred mountains must be dome and bulge, steep to the sky, and the water should be deep and wide, with a long history and narration with the sea. Therefore there are Confucian sages commenting on this. The way of the sage is tall, similar to the mountain, and the highest is above the sky. Standing next to Qin Pingan, this is the first time Qing Tong has seen the magnificent scene of Xuaishan with his own eyes. It is indeed the only one in the world. It's no wonder that the most sacred master would choose this place as a temporary study dojo to fight against the great ancestor of Moon Mountain. Qing Tong had previously visited the 5 sacred mountains of Beipingzu with Qin Pingan. He only talked about the Tao Qi contained in the mountains and rivers. Compared with that, the Qi practitioners of the middle 5 realms, who were just like earth immortals, encountered a soaring realm. The flower and fruit stuffed in Xuaishan is as famous as the Qingshan wine in Zhuhai Dongtian and the Baihua stuffed in Baihuafuti. In addition, the Suzhai in Shanjun Temple is even more famous in Jiuzhou. The voyage of the Dajiao has a lofty status and vast magical powers. It is rumored that it is much higher than the other 4 Zongdashan monarchs. According to the old View Master, as long as he travels in the Xuaishan area, he can be regarded as most of the 14th level monks, second only to the Jingsheng Shiping who is in the Forest of Merit. Zhou Yu and Qin Pingan said, "You and I meet at the mountain gate." Qin Pingan had an extra hiking stick in his hand, nodded and walked to the gate of Xuaishan. Obviously, he had the acquiescence of the tour and allowed Qin Pingan to use a Taiming stream as a long bridge to span thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. In this dream, if Qing Tong deliberately hides his whereabouts, then the relationship between Qing Tong and Qin Pingan is like a night ship to the world. Just as Qing Tong was about to move, he noticed the fierce gaze of the golden armored godman, so he stopped immediately, stretched out 2 fingers and supported the edge of the fence to apologize. "Just relying on you Tongis how Qing Tong, also want to set foot on my Xuaishan Shinto? What about the customs clearance certificate issued by the Zhongtu Confucian Temple? Otherwise you go and ask for a verbal purpose with the sacrament." Zhou Yu appeared at the gate of the mountain, and there was a huge stone tablet beside it, inscribed with the words, "Only the sky is above." The 2 sides climbed up the steps together, and there are many scenic spots along the way. Many ancient stone steels have dragon seals, phoenix seals and heavenly script talisman, and they have been eroded by the long river of time, and later generations will not know the true meaning of them. Xuaishan stone inscriptions are the world's top in terms of quantity and number. There are thousands of monuments in existence, and there are more than 10,000 cliff inscriptions. It is said that all the Xuaishan steels in the Haoran world, as long as they are from the handwriting of the monks on the mountain genealogy, are to be shared with the Shanjun mansion on schedule. Traveling around has the same meaning as Li Yeho, the king of the South Sea, but the great of Xuaishan has to be more clear and unmistakable. Do you know that in the future the merits will become very precious, extremely precious, and it is no longer a tasteless one, especially those monks in the ascended realm who have made military exploits. They will regard this thing as one of the great opportunities to break the realm. As long as you have the protection of merit, it is like being in an excellent dojo with the right time and place. Afterwards, you can do more with half the effort after you practice. Tianlai Lu Jubao and his like, make progress in every possible way and hope will come true. For Ai Zhou Weishan and the like, it will be a long drought in the rain, and the willows will reveal another village. Just talk about the next Sanjiao patriarch Sandao, originally a person like you who has great merit in the body, blessed by nature is abundant, and I will be envious of it. Furthermore, the sinking of the land in the southeast is a foregone conclusion. But maybe others don't know the mystery of the inside, don't you know? Then the aura of the vast world will naturally flow from other places in the 8 continents, especially from the northwest to Tongtong Yizhou is tilted. This is where the avenue lies. If the water flows down from above, this is the general trend. This is also the route of that Qing Tong standing on the sidelines and still full of confidence. Because Qing Tong can sit back and enjoy its achievements, I don't understand it. It's fine to say that you are kept in the dark, but since you know it, why are you in a hurry? You are tantamount to using 30% or 40% of your own merits to exchange 10% or 20% of the income for Tongyi's Hao. Don't you understand this account? Qin Pinyin, tell me, what do you think? Tell me so that I can smile. After being slapped and covered with a reprimand, Qin Pingan smiled. He was not a predecessor like his own ancestors, and could not say such an angry remark. The Jinjiao Shinren caught a glimpse of the young man's face and eyes and said with an aura, I am familiar with the old scholar. It does not mean that I am familiar with you. The Tao is unbiased and the law is like rain. Qin Pingan explained softly, in this majestic rain on the earth of grace, I am in it, no exception. Of course I can learn from the youth and wait for the blessing, but there is a problem here. I am a trainer. It's more a sword repair, the breakthroughs gained with merit, even if it is a series of breakthroughs, such as directly changing from Yuanying to Yupu and then becoming an immortal, but for a pure sword repairer in the long run, it is still, if the gain is not worth the loss, this account may have to be calculated like this. Picking up the trekking stick in his hand, Qin Pingan pointed to the mountainside, raised it a few more points, pointed to the top of Suishan and slowly said, go fast, then you can only spin around there, but if you walk slowly some, but can go to the top of the mountain before stopping. Zhou Yu smiled and said, a great sword fairy in the eyes of the hermit, is so worthless? Qin Pingan's ability to think this way can't be said to be wrong, it's a kind of narrowing down. But the problem is that a fairyland sword repairer, even in the Middle-earth divine continent, sure enough, Qin Pingan gave the final answer, I want to become a pure sword repairman in the 14th realm. Hearing this, Zhou Yu looked at it and was speechless for a long time. 14th level cultivators are already rare, and the 14th level swordsman is even more powerful. So the 14th level swordsman with pure 2 characters? Pei Min, one of Howren's 3 best swordsmanship, has been blocked by these 2 words for thousands of years? Qin Pingan continued, if the gift of merit, I can decide how to use it. For example, I can exchange it for a large sum of money from the gods, or to win some handy worlds for Luapa Mountain and Shindu Mountain. Bao, whether I'm doing long-term planning for the 2 Zongmen mountain tops, I will definitely reserve a small part of the merits in my hands. Maybe in this dream, I'll just swim in the water mansion to see the water god, no ill pay my respects to the mountain. Zhou Yu said, it can be regarded as a kind of gentleman who loves money and uses it in a proper way. By the way, Qin Pingan, the last time the Confucian temple was discussed, why didn't you even get a sage? Among the disciples of Wensheng's lineage, Li Baoping is already a gentleman, a veritable female master, and Li Huai and Dali servant Zhao Yu are both sage titles. Among Qin Ping's students there is another student named Chao Sunny. Fortunately, this person seems to be a different scholar from Shizu and his husband. Qin Pingan said, if the seniors are willing to recommend 1 or 2 and say a few fair words at the Confucian temple, the juniors would like to thank you in advance. Zhou Yu smiled and said, I don't want to avoid relatives, nor is it my turn to be an outsider with a background. Among the several descendants of Wensheng's lineage, there must be only the youngest guy who can say such things. It is no wonder that the old scholar is the most partial disciple, most like him, love to drink the most, thick-skinned, and elders. The key is that Qin Pingan has also found a wife, and Qing is better than Lan from Lan. Is it a breakthrough for Wensheng's lineage? Just talking about the relationship between the elders, Cui Yang, the former literary saint, was too talented, so even if the embroidered tiger is clearly gentle, looks gentle, and treats others politely, he will still give people the illusion of domineering, and his disciple Qi Jingchun, it is because of the deep living and simple, rarely go out to travel. Because of his birth, how many people can be older than him? So how many elders in the world dare to regard themselves as elders? As for the person with the worst temper who is generally recognized as a Wensheng in the same vein, before practicing the sword, he was born with a cold face. After practicing the sword, it was even more troublesome for the old talent to make smiles and apologize. Qin Pingan asked with a smile, can senior fellow Taoists make an exception to step into the land and be a guest in the mountains? This guy has long been fascinated by our Suzhai and Suishan. Traveling around was non-committal, he smiled, how come it's let Suishan? Qin Pingan said, since the senior is familiar with her husband, he is a good friend, how can the junior and Suishan be considered half-done? Zhou Yu reminded, since the relationship is only half-baked, don't make the idea of those inscriptions. Qin Pingan asked, "The incense of Mount Zhushan?" Zhou Yu nodded and said, "No problem. The old scholar does have a good student who can share the worries for her husband. In the future, the truth of this deed of repairing the land gap will become clear to the world." Haha, with the consistent style of the old scholars, let alone the sages of the Confucian temple who will be annoyed, I am afraid that even if it comes to the saint of ceremony, the old scholars will all a few words, but old talents may also rarely be silent. Like reading a good book, not willing to share it. Qing Tong, who stood in place obediently waiting for the news, suddenly sounded a decree from Suishan in the Lake of Heart, which unexpectedly allowed her to climb the mountain to visit the mountain and eat a bowl of plain noodles. The godman, the golden body, has no leakage. From Qing Tong's aura of sight, it is a kind of majestic atmosphere of, the mountain is almost in line with the sky. So Qing Tong always felt that on the border of the Zhongyue land, if Zhou Yu handed a sword from Suishan, Qing Tong waited a little, and he might not have to go back to Tongyi's house. So I was lucky enough to be able to go to Suishan to eat the plain noodles before leaving. It was really a surprise. The young fellow respectfully bowed to Yao Yao. After thanking Zhou Yu, he drew a gourd and drew on a gourd and learned the same way as Qin Ping's. He arrived at the foot of the mountain, and stepping out of a picture of dreams, even if today is New Year's Eve, the good men and believers who burn incense along the main Shinto path are still in an endless stream, the voices are so full, and the incense of Suishan is so prosperous, it is no wonder that traveling can refine that gold body. Qing Tong wears a power fence again, hides in the ranks of ordinary masters, and walks in the bustling mountain road. Qing Tong is complacent and looks quite contented. Hanging out with Mr. Zheng, I really don't have to worry about eating and drinking. Look, the great god Suishan must give a face. Zhou Yu took Qin Pingan to the top of Suishan mountain, ascending and looking into the distance, teaching people only think that all the mountains outside this mountain are small. Someone once said that the chaos of Shinto is one. Some people say that my way is consistent. As for the two sides, who is right and wrong, who is the unity of all things, and who is the life of all things, for the time being there is no answer. Zhou Yu asked, "Why does this youth think you are Zheng Juzhong?" Qin Pingan said frankly, "I was misled by Yun Lu of Jiozhen Immortal Hall." Zhou Yu smiled and said, "It seems that smart people are most afraid of Zheng Zhongzhong." Qin Pingan nodded and said, "Anyone who is too smart will be afraid of the smartest person." Zhou Yu's eyes are playful and he squints at Qin Pingan. Qin Pingan understood clearly and shook his head. "I may not be able to reach the mental strength of senior brother and Mr. Zheng in my life." Qing Tong didn't dare to take a long walk and climb the mountain. At the moment he was seated in a noodle shop near the Shanjun temple and had a bowl of hot plain noodles. The taste was very good and the reputation was well deserved. Zhou Yu said, "The opportunity that originally belonged to the Xiafengdu sword pill is outdated, but now it has already been spent elsewhere." Qin Pingan smiled freely, "It's just a matter of fate." Zhou Yu nodded, "If you don't have this kind of mind, you would still ask for a pure sword repair in the 14th realm," and said, "It's not better than the other 8 continents, especially the Aquarius and Beiju Luzhou. One is your hometown after all. The status of a hermit is the most effective, and it is naturally close to you. But this Middle-earth divine continent has always been the most polite. Being young and vigorous and ignoring the rules are two different things. For the rest of the Mountain Monarch Mansion, I will say hello to you first. Just say that you will travel to the 5 sacred mountains next time, how about it?" Of course, Qin Pingan would not refuse and thanked him. Just let Qing Tong finish the bowl of plain noodles. Before leaving, Qin Pingan and Shan Jun traveled around and thanked them. "Suishan is the only place where my husband can drink happily. In the future, as long as there is a place where Luapa Mountain and Qingping Jianzong can be used, the younger generation can only be sent. Traveling around is not polite with young people. Is to be kinder than the old star." Zhou Yu didn't even feel that Qin Pingan was saying something that would be cost-effective. After only waiting for the patriarch of the 3 teachings to go out of the way, it will be a new situation that has not been seen in the world for 10,000 years. Only those 14th realm cultivators who are unconstrained will show up one by one when they want to, and they will all take their own shots. On the avenue, chaos was everywhere. Yangmo conspiracies are coming in abundance. You must know that before leaving Suishan, Master Most Saint once said to Li Sheng, "After I leave, the plan for you will follow, so be careful." The 5 mountains in the Middle Earth are Sui Mountain, Gui Mountain, Jiui Mountain, Yanji Mountain, and Jushu Mountain. The female mountain monarch of Yanji Mountain, named Zhu Yuxian, has a rather weird name, Bitter Vegetable. At that time, the husband restored the Confucian temple, and Zhu Yuxian gave a gift from all directions at Gongda Lin, including an origami black-clothed swallow. On the side of Jiui Mountain, Xuanhuan presented a pot of wunyun calamus at that time. However, the two mountain monarchs who sit in Guishan and Jushu respectively participated in the discussion of the Confucian temple, but they did not go to the Gongda forest. On Gishan's side, it was because of an old grievance that he didn't deal with Wensheng's line. There are 5 mountains in one country, and Mount Gui is one of the 5 mountains on a continent. There are a large number of 5 mountains under its jurisdiction. In one of these mountains the old scholar once went to visit, once because of his disciple Jun Qian. The mountain monarch who lives in Shushan has never mixed up with such mundane things that are contaminated with human affection and sophistication. However, Huailian has a great respect for the Great Wall of Sword Qi. He once publicly declared that the Great Wall of Sword Qi has fought for a few more years, and Howren has fought fewer battles for a few years. There are countless lives for me. The merit is great. The implication was that Xuanhuan Huailian obviously admired the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi. It's just that Qin Pingan took Qingtong on a long trip, but they returned without success. They were all things Qin Pingan expected. Public and private were clearly distinguished. If it's not for his husband's face, plus Suishan travels. I said hello in advance, and it is estimated that there will be a few lawsuits in the Confucian temple. The female mountain monarch Zhu Yuxian, although she did not promise the hidden official to light the incense of the heart, she still graciously invited Qin Pingan to the Xuanhuan shrine and drank a cup of tea. Qingtong was so drunk and drank a cup of the prestigious Rizu tea. In addition, the Jiui mountain god was still polite, and he appeared at the gate to remind Qin Pingan that this kind of transgressive behavior cannot be repeated. However, he chatted with Qin Pingan about something, saying that it was the Mrs. Yen Yen who was free someday and welcomed her to Jiui mountain as a guest. Qin Pingan agreed with a smile. Howren has said that the world has 2.5 plum blossoms, and one is in Jiui mountain since ancient times. The monarch of Mount Gui, the name Tianjin, did not see Qin Pingan directly. He only asked a temple wish to come to the foot of the mountain and said, "Forgive me if you are not welcome, the hermit can go home." Qin Pingan, who had eaten a sturdy closed door, stood outside the mountain gate and did not leave immediately. After holding his hands, he looked up at the plaque on the mountain gate. Of course, the gray-haired old temple wishing did not dare to continue chasing people. This kind of high heavenly gods fighting, a little temple wishing, can't afford it. If you don't know that Lord Shan is staring at the movement of the mountain gate at this moment, Lao Miaozhu would really like to have a polite greeting with this famous young hidden official. And the of Shushan Mountain, who appeared in person at the gate of the mountain, sneered at Qin Pingan and put on a very serious remark. "This is not the Ascension Realm sword repair, it will be in the future. Howren, any mountain in the world, isn't it your own door?" In Qin Pingan Tao's heart, the lake of heart rippled and Qingtong's voice resounded, "Since you know that the governor can't do anything, why bother to ask for trouble?" In fact, Qingtong did not sprinkle salt on Qin Pingan's wounds, because this kind of reckless visit would definitely annoy people in vain, and it was no less unpleasant than the market in the mountains. It was a big deal. Taboo things. To give the simplest example, in the future if Qin Pingan travels to the Guishan and Jushu mountains, even if the two Wuyue mountain monarchs do not know Qin Ping's whereabouts at all, they will still create an illusory avenue out of thin air. When over, Qin Pingan said, "If you don't really ask for a request, how can you know that there is no case? As long as there is any mountain monarch who is willing to agree to the 5 sacred mountains in the Middle Earth, in addition to traveling around Suishan, for example, if the Jushu mountain nodded, then Qin Pingan will rerun Guishan, Yanzishan and Jiu mountain. Ishan. If it was Zhu Yuxian who was visiting for the second time, nodded and agreed, then the 3 mountain monarchs including Huailian might not be able to send Qin Pingan so easily. Just giving a sum of merit is not enough, so what about fame and fortune? To know the boundaries of the 5 sacred mountains, from the mansion of the gods to the many Taoist temples in the mountains, Qin Pingan has long been able to find out clearly, only that the female sword with which Zhu Yuxian became attached is repairing Zhu Mei. The latter is still as a young girl. Zhu Mei had followed Lin Junbai to the Great Wall of Jianqi. There are many martial arts in Jushu Mountain, but will Xuanhuan Huailian too much? For example, Qin Pingan promised to break the boundary by himself, or who would break through the boundary with the strongest in Luapa Mountain and would choose Jushu Mountain. And there are many swordsmanships in the Guishan realm, and Xuanhuan doesn't deal with his own Wenxing in the same line? In the future, those sword fairy embryos who have a secret lantern from the Shanjin's mansion hanging behind their backs will be able to practice leisurely. It is best to behave in a decent manner. Don't be too arrogant. Otherwise, the flying sword won't be long if you ask the sword to take the sword. of the eyes. Another example is the Niaoji mountain, where the place where the monarchy is closed, but it is one of the two princely mountains of Jushu mountain. Qin Pingan laughed at himself, for different. Chui Yang Zhengzhuzhong Wushuangjiang are really hard to learn. If it were changed to senior brother Chui Yang to take this trip to the 5 sacred mountains of China, with the same realm and the same identity, it is estimated that no matter what the feelings in their hearts, the 5 mountain monarchs would definitely nod their heads eventually. In Guishan, known as the land of the moon, there is a noble guest who will not drive away, Gu Qingsong with the road named xianxia, and an unnamed senior disciple who taught Lu Qin as the 3rd head of Baiyujing. Gu Qingsong complained to the mountain monarch, "What's the matter with you? Why don't you listen to persuasion at all? If you become a mountain god, you can't understand people, right?" The elegant-looking elders in Confucian shirts have become accustomed to this. Someone's speech only needs to go in and out of the right ear. Gu Qingsong said to himself, "Remember the stinking problem of eating or not at the beginning on your plate. The top of the alternate mountain was one of the alternate hills, but it was not because Lu 16 was not allowed to travel and eat. After a lot of hardship, I also accused Lu Shizhua of being a beast with a flat-headed hair. Whatever the result, he was trampled on the ground by the old scholar with a few feet and fell into the ground for more than 100 meters. I have to learn from the old scholar to protect my shortcomings, right? I helped quarrel to the Confucian temple. How did it end? I heard that the embroidered tiger, who worked as a brother for Lu 16, directly gave the mountain monarch on the top of the mountain. Nearly 100 crimes are listed, each of which can be investigated. Not to mention that the top of the mountain failed to regain its height. I just ate in prison at Gongdalan. Was it delicious? You were embarrassed at that time? Anyhow, it was a great mountain monarch. At that time, why didn't you directly use your live's magical powers to help dig a hole in the temple of Confucius? Now, who doesn't know that Lao Xiaocai is the most partial disciple of Qin Pingan, the closed disciple? Are you on the poll?" Mr. Lao Shan frowned and said, "Is there no end?" Gu Qingsong snorted, "If I don't have anything to ask, I would rarely tell you these truths." Mr. Lao Shan said, "I got a decree from the Confucian temple before, but I just acted according to orders." Gu Qingsong doubted, "It was Saint Naya who spoke and asked you to stumble Qin Pingan?" Lao Shanjun said angrily, "Speak carefully." Gu Qingsong said to himself, "Surely it won't happen. If Yaxing doesn't deal with Wensheng again, it is also a dispute of knowledge. Aliang is a coup-headed strategist in Wensheng's line. Otherwise, which Confucian temple leader? Shouldn't be. Now that Lao Xiao has just recovered his status, with a hard waist and a big voice, Jing Xing Shiping is an ear reporting who can't control his mouth. I have the best relationship with the old scholar in the Confucian temple, who has such a hard head." Lao Shanjun said, "That decree has no signature." Gu Qingsong rubbed his chin, "That's weird. The little master always tells people that they don't do secret things, but it's not the instruction of the subsage. Could it be that the holy master like me came to the Tianjin Daoyu side? Have something to ask for?" Lao Shanjun furiously said, "Gu Qingsong, you don't have to talk about it. If you dare to talk nonsense, go down the mountain immediately." Never thought that Gu Qingsong dropped his sleeve and said, "Just leave." He really disappeared in a flash and went outside the mountain. Just a moment later, Gu Qingsong shrank the mountains and rivers again and returned to the place. Gu Qingsong said, "I was driven out by you twice and I have been asking for help 3 times in total. Friends Tianjin, you don't give me the slightest face anymore. I really want to swear." No matter how good Lao Shanjun is to raise Qigong, he can't stand Gu Qingsong's open eyes and talk nonsense. "Dare you Xianxia not open your mouth and be a mute before?" Gu Qingsong shook his head and said, "Isn't it as good as a young man in his early 40s who can hold his breath? Tianjin Taoist, a lot of years old, have all lived to a certain dog day? There are many mountain monks in the world, and at least half of their popular nicknames come from Gu Qingsong's mouth. This person can still jump alive to this day. I have to say it is a miracle." In the Jushu mountain, a new wine shop has been opened in recent years, but the reputation is not obvious and the threshold is high, so there have been few customers. At the moment, apart from the old shopkeeper and a shop assistant named Su Jia, there are only a wine guest. Shanjun has a lot of flowers. An old Taoist riding a green bull, carrying a bag crossbody, adorned with a row of emerald green bamboo pipes, bumped against each other, crisp and sweet. Having saved enough money for drinks, I'm here to drink again today. In the ancient years, each of the 5 sacred mountains in the Middle Earth had a real person's administration. Among them there were 3 real persons. And this monarch, who is known as the Qingyo Taoist priest, happened to be one of the one principal and 2-3 true men. After leaving the night ship, the old Taoist priest came here to revisit the old place and reopen the dojo at the old site in the mountains. It is just that the authority of the past years is a thing of the past. In the early days, the 5 sacred mountains and Dadu, the real people in charge were not the mountain monarchs and the water gods, but the land gods, who were invited by their saints to come out of the mountain. When Li Sheng later abolished all the real person government, Feng Jun went out and traveled, but he provoked swordsman Pei Min. The sky and the earth seemed to be unstable, so he had to hide on the night ship. The old Taoist put the green cow outside the door, entered the wine shop alone, and had a slap in the door with the mountain monarch Huailian, and then asked the old treasurer for a pot of Wangyu wine. People are in good spirits at happy events. On the night boat, the old Taoist priest and the young hidden official made a deal and obtained a true picture of the 5 sacred mountains of the ancestors' rank. Harmony generates wealth. This is called harmony and wealth. To be honest, Qin Pingan finally failed to climb the mountain today. The old Taoist was actually quite regretful. When he came on the road, he thought of going to the wine shop. When he met the unkind mountain monarch, he would hold a few words for the young hermit. Just work. There was a birdcage on the counter and there was a oriole inside. Seeing the old Taoist priest who came to sit down, he opened his mouth and said, "Trash, trash." The veteran Taoist was not at all annoyed and he smiled and said, "A cultivator of immortality in the poor way is not a pure martial artist who can only fight and kill. He can have a few kilograms of martial arts." Su Jia put the hip flask and the white bowl on the table, and dismantled the platform and said, "Master Shanjun just said, not mentioning Qin Pingan, only that the sycamore tree spirit of the town demon building in addition to the Ascension Realm cultivation base, can also be regarded as half a godly martial artist." Feng Jun smiled and said, "Poor Dao is competing with a sycamore tree and it won't be impossible." The old shopkeeper leaned over the counter and said with a smile, "I was so clumsy that I couldn't see the depth of the hidden official's martial arts." As soon as he mentioned the young hidden official who had drunk twice in his shop, the shop assistant Su Jia became angry and said annoyed, "The innocent sign of the small wine shop in Jianghu Great Wall, but they all learned from our shop." Feng Jun took a sip of his drink and sighed with his beard, "I was on a night boat and I had a chance to meet Qin Daoyu." There was still a discussion about each other. There is a saying in Qin Daoyu that there is no lack of the world's Taoism. It's just that the Taoist priests on the street are worried about them. It's really true, no water leaks. It's no wonder that at a young age you can be in a high position and perform successive feats. Su Jia said, "That guy is lucky." The old shopkeeper smiled and shook his head, because Su Jia and Chao Ci are friends, so Qin Pingan is not pleasing to the eye all the time. Feng Jun even shook his head, holding a bowl with one hand, and then raising one hand retorting, "This is a bad remark, to underestimate Qin Daoyu. A man is so hungry that he can eat 9 big meat buns in one breath, and ordinary people eat buns. The more you eat, the more unpalatable. If you eat the first steamed bun, the taste is the same as the 9th steamed bun. This is a cultivator. In this life, the poor Tao will travel north and south, travel the world and read countless people like Qin Daoyu. A handful of them." Huailian said, "You two just ask if you want to. You don't need to be circumspect." One deliberately involved Qin Pingan, and the other took the conversation. In the final analysis, he was still curious about why he refused to climb Qin Pingan. Feng Jun asked curiously, "Since fellow Dao Huailian doesn't have a bad feeling for the young hidden official, and even has a somewhat undisguised look at him, why should he not be allowed to climb the mountain today? What's the matter?" Huailian sneered, "Sword repair does not look at one's own realm, does it also depend on identity?" Feng Jun shook the wine bowl, "But after all, isn't this a reason not to let him climb the mountain? In addition to his identity as a sword repairman, Qin Pingan is still a martial artist who can compete with Chao Ci in 4 rounds. Huailian said, "The reason is given, believe it or not, you are free." Feng Jun looked regretful and said, "Unfortunately on the ship the news is not well informed, otherwise even if the poor Dao sells iron, he will have to collect a sum of money and bet on Qin Daoyu to win Chao Ci. Regarding Chao Ci and Qin Pingan, 2 martial artists of the same age, the monks on the mountain and the martial artist on the mountain were arguing and quarreling endlessly in the dispute between the 2 martial artists of the same age. The monks in the mountains generally admire Chao Ci, and feel that in the future martial arts, Qin Pingan will not be able to stand side by side with Chao Ci in this life, so he can only catch up all the way. Chao Zihue was Qin Pingan's lifelong martial arts skill. If he is lucky, he can be awarded the title of second under heaven. However, pure Wufu mostly agrees with Chen Ping and even more. There is only one point of view, and a consensus has been reached on the mountain. That is not to talk about the final height of the martial arts of Chao and Qin, only the process of practicing martial arts and boxing. You can learn from Qin Pingan, but you don't need to learn from Chao Ci. Qin Pingan took Qing Tong to leave Zhong to Shenzhou, returned to Aquarius Island, and walked on a ridge road called De Swiling. Qing Tong didn't dare to say, "I have really visited the mountain temple here, even if it is finished, can I return to Tongizong?" Qin Pingan gave a hum. The mountain goddess Wei Wei walked out of the clay statue in the temple, waiting for her to see the young sword fairy in the blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, a little embarrassed. "Mr. Qin Jianxian, Lord Qin, Master Hermit?" If Wei Wei remembers correctly, this is the 4th time Qin has been here. 4 times in less than 30 years. Could it be? When she thought about it together, she couldn't wait to slap herself in the face. Is that silly book of landscape travels? Did you forget the scene when you first met? There is never the slightest bit of pity, fragrant and cherished jade, only the flower is destroyed by hand. Now the mountain temple is lavish and developed. Wei Wei had to admit that it was all given by the person in front of him, and the numbers that Qin Jianxian taught to his family temple before were really useful. Sitting on the bluestone bench outside the temple, Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Everything is always difficult at the beginning and everything goes smoothly. It is gratifying and congratulatory." Wei Wei stood by xianxia grinning and said, "If there were not many things plus my little mountain god, the foundation is not stable, and it is not easy to move, otherwise I would have gone to Luapa Mountain and Qin Jianxian to come to thank you. Previously, let the temple serve as the servant girl. According to Qin Pingan's method, I learned the goddess in the book to dream, and traveled with the mountains and rivers of the students who went to Beijing to rush the exam. A scholar who looks rather stubborn but quite knowledgeable, after waking up from a dream, is regarded as a good omen, so he is full of confidence. In the Beijing science arena he is truly talented and thoughtful and writing like a god. Although I didn't get the first class and third-rank scholars, he also got the second-class first name, and he was able to pass and roll his name in the Golden Palace. After that, he was even admitted to the Imperial Academy without any examination. If nothing goes wrong, 6 books will be distributed as the principals soon. If Beijing is released again, it will be the start of a county magistrate in the officialdom. Moreover, it is said that in the Beijing municipal examination, the chief examiner who has been in charge of a country's cultural balance for more than 20 years, as well as those scoring officers, were full of praise for the person's examination papers. It was only after the palace examination that he performed slightly abnormally before he was not among the candidates. His Majesty the Emperor drew the first 3 names in a Zhubi circle. Shizi High School, on the way back home from Beijing, went straight to the mountain temple, worshipped incense, kowtow inscribed on the wall, returned to the study and wrote a poem, recorded in his collection of works, specifically to record this miraculous thing, planning to do it in the future out of the book. The scholar thinks it is a dream come true to Wei Wei and the 2 goddess attendants, is it not? Qin Pingan smiled and reminded, "In the future read more sage books and read less of those miscellaneous books." Wei Wei still doesn't know Qin Pingan is actually here for the 5th time. It's just that the last time I watched Wei Wei and the 2 temple attendants, chatting about the landscape travel notes, the chat was very happy, the goddess of the mountain smiled and rolled on the mat. Qin Pingan didn't show up so as not to be disappointed. Wei Wei was confused and could only nod his head. Nowadays, dozens of red lanterns secretly made by mountain temples are illuminated on the realm of temples and temples. In market language there is a sentence, "Something is covered by me." In fact, the word cover is quite knowledgeable. Within the boundaries of the mountain temples and temples, those lanterns are not only the high gates of the county government, but also the families of the gentry who are still humble, and more than half of the lanterns are in the poor lanes and rural villages of that city. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Isn't it difficult to borrow again?" Wei Wei owed a debt to the county town temple before. It is reasonable to say that even if he now has a cultural fate, after the debt is repaid, the mountain temple will certainly not be able to build such a large number of incense lanterns. This is like Huang Tinghua, who is already considered to be rich in water transportation. The Zhengshan of the rivers including the Wuyue and Hanxijiang are already a little harder. This has led to the Taidian River at the door of Xiang Mansion's house that has not been elevated to Jianghu Zhengshan. It was not that Emperor Huang Tinghua didn't want to cling to Xiang Mansion. It was because of limited luck and powerlessness in a country. Wei Wei said with a guilty conscience, after changing the wine debt and owing a new debt, I still have to pay it back. Qin Pingan smiled and helped explain, is it just not in a hurry? Wei Wei smiled embarrassedly and bit the bullet and said, I am anxious to repay it. I don't have debts and I am light. I understand the truth. I want to set a deadline. It's just that the neighbors of the counties and townsmen are not worried about them. Wait. I have accumulated enough incense here and it's not too late, and on the side of the Xuanhuan temple, I also actively asked me if I need incense. Qin Pingan smiled and said, that's right, the rivers and lakes don't help the poor, and the relatives help the poor but don't help the lazy. Distant relatives are not as good as neighbors. The neighbors on the mountain are nothing more than the Xianxia mansion, plus the gods of mountains and waters, the Qinghuang temple and the Wenwu temple. In the past, Wei Wei's mountain temple was a poor man who could not make ends meet, and Wei Wei, the newly inspired mountain empress, seemed to be a poor manager at first glance. Of course it is different now. Qin Pingan suddenly asked, what is the name of the pilgrim who donated money to build the temple? Wei Wei smiled brightly and said, jianghu. Qin Pingan silently wrote down the name. Before, Wei Wei found a place on the mountain and built a small temple. There was a big local pilgrim who donated 2 large sums of sesame oil. This person is kind but does not seek fame, and is involved in the construction of bridges. The most generous. After that, Wei Wei invited a lonely old woman who was kind and believed in Buddhism to come to the temple as a blessing, and some old women nearby would often come to the temple to help. Qin Pingan said about Xinxiang. Of course, Wei Wei agreed without hesitation. She had already begun to enjoy herself. She no longer planned to take it, and knew that she was going to be really lavish this time. After paying off the debts to those city gods, there must be a surplus on the mountain temple. I can create a bunch of red lanterns secretly made by the mountain god's mansion again. Just remembering something, Wei Wei asked cautiously, my mountain temple after all occupies the location of the old temple site, will it be a taboo? Does that count? The dove occupying the magpie's nest? Qin Pingan smiled and shook his head and said, don't think too much. If you really feel sorry for it, hold a temple fair every 15th day of the Lunar New Year and try to add some incense to the temple for the common people. Wei Wei's eyes lit up. Temple fair? Qin Pingan said, you are just renting out the shop and collecting some rent. The rent should be less than more. In the future, relying on this small and flowing income, you can save a little bit of money, and then hire a bunch of skilled craftsmen at the foot of the mountain. Follow the scrolls at the bottom of the mountain and the pictures of the 16 Ingzhen and 18 Arhats on the fan to build an Arhat hall. Once this is done, you should be a kind of votive. However, I personally suggest that it is better to erect a temple to worship the 5. In the Arhat hall with 100 Arhat statues, those who enter it can first choose an Arhat to start counting according to their age and birth date, and count all the way through. The Arhat who counts at the end will be protected by that Arhat. Wei Wei widened his eyes and said, this is also okay? Wei Wei's words were full of sighs. What kind of sword fairy or mountain master you Qin Pingan do you have to do business? If I were the ancestor of the business, I would directly let you be the second in command. Qin Pingan angrily smiled and said, I didn't talk nonsense, I'm paying attention to this. I took Pei Qian and Chao Qingqing on a long trip before, during which I passed by a temple, and inside that large temple I did say so. Wei Wei, frustrated, put his hands together quickly and said, sincere is spirit and sincere is spirit. Qin Pingan stood up, hesitating, and gave an extra amount of merit than expected. Where did he use it? At this moment, a familiar voice sounded in the Lake of Heart, asking about something. Qin Pingan, what do you think of that 3-4 dispute? Qin Pingan hesitated for a while and gave his own answer. The man smiled and said, very well, I can go back. In Tongyi's house, in the corridor of the town demon tower, Lu Yen asked with a smile, what answer is it that makes the most sage master so satisfied? This problem is not trivial. As a closed disciple of Wensheng's line, Qin Pingan wants to answer decently, the key is to be sincere, which is naturally extremely difficult. The most sacred master stroked his beard and smiled. Qin Pingan only said one sentence, Z said there are no classes. Rao and Lu Yen would be astonished for a long time, think for a moment, pat the railing lightly and laughed. Poor Dao sighs inferiorly. You're tuning in to the Sword Dance in the Vast Sky YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.